Chapter 101, Party, Part 3. Mahmoud Sheikh/Dial. Okay, no. Tony slammed his hand on the table, surprising Fitz, and I jury-rig cheats, and I've been building things since you were a kid. I am absolutely the best inventor. Fitz and I shared a look. We had taken a seat in the middle of the area. Hulk, Thor, and Volstagg were currently in the midst of an eating contest, ingesting what had to be hundreds of pounds of meat. Betty, Jane, Pepper, and Steve were sitting at another table, chatting. Not us though. Fitz and I had somehow gotten dragged into an argument I didn't understand. Are you drunk? I asked. I mean, Tony, you are awesome. Hell yeah I am, he declared proudly. But jury rig is like, broken, I said for emphasis. His tech is always going to be a glass cannon. Sure, it isn't as reliable as yours, but it hits hard as hell. Right up until it stops working on Saturdays because it feels like it, Tony scoffed, taking a big swig of whiskey. I am, and always will be, the king of engineering. On Earth, maybe, I scoffed, keeping the thought that he really was the king of engineering in the back of my mind. And only for the Iron Man suits. Fitz sounded serious. But he gave me a grin when Tony was taking another sip. When was the last time you made something that wasn't a piece of armor? Did you just dash? Tony glared at us. Okay, Ross, fanboy, apparently you too have gained sudden confidence that is decidedly undeserved. You, he pointed at Fitz, are about 30 years too early to even think of being able to match me, while you, Tony pointed at me, not only have to cheat, but the way you cheat is about as reliable as my dad's business partner, and I killed that guy. Tony had apparently gotten over the death of his old mentor. In fact, I can beat you right here and now. Bring it, I shouted. Good luck you American bastards. Fitz cheered. Despite our anger, all three of us were grinning as we got up and ran for the stairs, rushing past Fondrel with a blonde on each arm as we exited the party for the labs. The second we got into the lab, we separated. I reached for the watch, Tony gave a longing look toward the lab, and Fitz ran for his table. It's nerd time. I cried happily, moving through the menu to reveal jury rig, transforming in a moment. The second I was red and pointy-eared, I laughed. What's the bet? Guns. Tony shouted. But harmless ones. So nothing that can actually hurt anyone. Best gun that actually works wins. And can we use equipment we've made before? Fitz asked. Yeah, why not? I'm no committee, Tony shrugged. Wait, they both turned to look at me. You both are drunk. So, to make it fair, I should also have my mind altered. I'm not sure that tracks, mate, Fitz said, watching as my tiny gremlin form hopped towards the nearby fridge. Sure it does. I opened the fridge and pulled out 3 cans of the kind of energy drink made for marathon science/gaming sessions. Whoa, don't dash. Fitz stared in horror as I pulled the tabs off all 3 cans and poured the cans into my gaping maw all at once. The caustic liquid poured down my throat in big gulps. Tossing aside the empty cans, I wiped my lips and grinned. That can't end well, Fitz said weakly. Yeah, he's like, what, 2 feet tall? Tony said as I climbed up onto a table with my stuff on it. Plus, alien biology. Just call it, moron. I cackled insanely. Tony grinned. All right, go. Jury rig was insane. Like, legit, insane. He was every mad scientist in fiction, with the combination of those lunatic mechanics you see online who make incredible machines of immense intricacy for the sake of doing it. Jury rig on caffeine made me feel like I was seconds from vibrating into the air and shooting into space. I slammed parts together with immense force, getting loud screeches of metal on metal. I ran to the small kitchen we had set up and grabbed flour, sugar, and salt. Fitz got some sort of hand cannon, while Tony ran into the kitchen as well, grabbing about 10 potatoes. Fix. I shook in place while shoving my pilfered ingredients into a compartment. Reassemble. Ha 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 ha. With a blur of arms flying, I smashed the last of the parts together. Tony shouted in the background, placing something along his rifle's barrel. It took little to no time for all 3 of us to finish our makeshift weapons. When done, we stood around each other, eyeing the other's contraptions. Fitz had by far the least complex device. It was basically a blunderbuss like a weapon with a large battery-like section along the top. Tony's weapon was shaped like an oversized shotgun, on the top of it as a big hopper and on Tony's back as a large sack with a tube feeding tomatoes, of all things, into the contraption. Mine is the biggest. I shouted proudly, lifting my weapon, which looked like a high-tech cannon. Yeah, kinda sad you had to overcompensate, Tony grinned. Howa, Fitz looked around at us. How are we testing dash? Boom, bitches. I fired my cannon at Fitz. Fucking hell. Fitz ducked as the small white ammo I'd fired slammed into the wall behind him. He turned to look at the sugary confection that now dripped from the wall. Birthday cake. Time to party? Ya ha 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 ha. I fired over and over, sending Tony and Fitz diving to the floor. Black, pink, red, and more colors of frosting flew, chocolate raining like blood. I am the king. Then bow to your new god. Tony spun to his feet and fired at me. I shouted in pain when a tomato slammed into me, sending me out the door in a spray of red vegetable. Fruit? Whatever. What is a god? Fitz pointed at Tony. To a non-believer. Fitz fired, and a blast of pure air slammed into Tony, sending him stumbling back with a shout. Fitz fired again and again, the small blasts pushing back Tony and destabilizing his shots. Not a massive push, but enough to make an adult male get jostled. Bring it on. I fired another birthday cake at Fitz, then dived towards the party to dodge another blast of air. Tony raised the gun in his hand. Oh yeah? Well, take this. Tony laughed with glee as the gun in his hands fired another tomato. And another. And another, in a stream of red. Do you believe now? Never. Fitz cried in defiance of the machine gun fire of fruit/vegetables, really needed to look up what tomatoes fell under later. The three of us rushed through the lab and ended up joining the party. I fired another blast of cake at Tony, instead of hitting a man in a suit. Tony fired a tomato that landed against a railing, sending red flying everywhere. Fitz fired his air blast at an incoming cake, exploding the baking good in midair. He did the same on a tomato flung his way, proving his air gun had some effectiveness. Back off! I shouted, diving down onto the main floor. Tony! Pepper shouted, only to let out a loud eep and duck the birthday cake I'd fired at Tony. Damn it, Dial, stand still. Never. I shouted back, running over the tops of tables and couches, sending drinks and food flying as people screamed. For a moment, time to slow. I was in midair between a couch and a table. Tony was laughing. Fitz had a large grin on his face. Steve had his shield raised to block an errant tomato. With a triumphant yell of now it's a party, Volstagg grabbed a handful of food to throw. I aimed my gun. Tony got me in midair at the same time I fired. I spun around for a moment before slamming into the ground. When I got up, a hush fell over the crowd. I paled. Oh shit, Tony, Fitz, and I said in unison. Hulk stood next to a worried Jen and Betty. The Aria ice cream cake on his face dripped to the ground. We all held our breaths as Hulk grabbed a piece and took an angry bite out of it. Hulk smiled. Hulk play. Hit the deck. Clint shouted. War. Volstagg cheered. Bridge, bitches. Isabel replied, grabbing a plate and firing. Soon, the group of drunk adults let loose. The rules, such as they were, was that if you were on the upper level or listening to the music, you were safe. If not, better grab a plate. So to the upper level went Pepper, Steve, Betty, Bucky, Sky, May, Matt, Lauren, Creel, Bobby, Sam, Foggy, Natasha, Fury, Hagan, Maria, Simmons, Carlson, Jane, and Fondrel, who somehow had two more blonde women following him around. Steve's old war buddies joined him, some of them grumbling at the sight of me. As one said, I had enough of gremlin shit during the war. The fighters were me, Tony, Fitz, Clint, Isabel, Volstagg, Thor, Hulk, Darcy, Sammy, and Rhodey, with a lot of fellow partygoers joining us. Rhodey and Tony immediately teamed up. To the left. Rhodey shouted, ducking as Tony fired at Thor, getting the blonde Asgardian in his chest. Get Dial. Tony shouted, only to sputter when mashed potatoes landed in his mouth. Never take me on in long-range combat, boys. Clint crowed, diving under the Hulk, who was laughing as he fired spaghetti at Volstagg. The super assassin flipped up, grabbed a tray to use as a shield against a tomato, then swung the tray to fire back the tomato back at Tony, getting him in the face. Get him, Clint. Natasha cheered above us. Nah, Bruce, you got this. Jen cheered. This is so immature, Betty said next to Jen. Jen chuckled. They're just letting off some dash. Splat. Jen stopped talking. Strawberry frosting dripped down her face, landing on her black dress. Betty and Natasha stepped back from her. Jen wiped her eyes clean, then glared at me. I grinned at her. You coming down, Jen? You mother dash. She leaped down at me, and I ran away cackling. Go Izzy. Bobby cheered from above. Fitz. Isabel shouted when another cake flew toward Team Bridge. Got it. Fitz fired his air gun, blasting apart the cake. His air gun was damn perfect for food war. We'd gone far beyond fight at this point, letting him destroy any ammunition out of the air, Isabel using him as a shield to unleash hell freely. Ha. Isabel threw a chicken drumstick like a throwing knife, getting Rhodey. Let's go. She's awesome, someone said to a chuckling Creel above. Matt and Foggy stood by side, Foggy giving Matt a play-by-play. Okay, Jen is chasing Dial, Hulk is using an entree as ammo, and the nerdy British guy just sent Volstagg into a pie attack by a hot brunette. You must be kidding, Matt said laughing. Dude, I swear to God. Foggy held his hands into a speakerphone. Go Jen, kick some butt. Team Law, Matt asked incredulously. For Asgard. Thor and Volstagg shouted, getting responding cheers from Sif and Fondrel above. Air Force. Sammy and Rhodey yelled, getting a loud agreement from Sam up above. Avengers. I shouted as I aimed at Jen, who roared through her grin. When I pulled the trigger, my gun released a loud whine. I stared at it. Oh. Jen took that moment to fire a pie at my face, sending me flipping through the air. I rolled to my feet and eyed my gun, who began to whine louder and louder. Run. I threw my gun at Jen, who caught it. She stared at the gun as it combined whining with a loud ringing. Oh, shit. She tossed it out the window at high speed. The gun flew into the distance for a few seconds. When it exploded, it was with a loud, window shaking, very rude noise. Nothing that would have hurt anyone, but I didn't want the smell hanging around. Ha. Tony yelled. I told you. Unreliable. Kiss my red blah. I was interrupted when Jen hit me with another pie. Then Clint slid on his knees, firing pieces of meat at Volstagg as the laughing man roared past. Clint tossed the food with the accuracy of a true expert. Darcy ran by as well, making up for her lack of technology, assassin skills, or superhuman ability with pure enthusiasm. Take that. Darcy fired cake, which slammed into Isabel. Oh, you did not. Isabel left the safety of Fitz's air gun to throw the cake back at Darcy. Darcy chucked a donut at Isabel, bouncing it off her head, and Isabel got her in the chest with turkey meat. Yeah, Izzy. Creel cheered his girlfriend. Dial, you gotta keep fighting. I took my friend's advice by grabbing more handfuls of food and leaping onto Volstag's back, using him as a vehicle as I tossed food over and over, getting more food by taking it from his beard. He didn't seem to mind, taking a swig of whiskey and laughing. This is most excellent. War, he shouted. I rose over his shoulder and took a pot shot at Rhodey. You little dash. Rhodey ripped Tony's gun away from him and started machine gunning everything like a maniac. A well-trained maniac, because soon we were all covered in sauce. Huo, huo, every Army and Air Force soldier in the room called back. You're an adult, Tony, act like it. Pepper yelled down at us. She would have been more convincing if she hadn't followed with, Darcy's sneaking up on you. Damn it. Darcy shouted before Tony got her with a tomato. Don't give up. Jane yelled down at Darcy. Lady Darcy, Thor tried to help Darcy up. I will aid yo pluff. Darcy laughed as she smashed the remains of something into Thor's face. Everyone for themselves, Thor. Pla, pla. Thor spat out the food. Where is your honor? Screw honor, I need more ammo. Darcy cheered. Hell yeah. Sammy raised his large hands, carrying 2 handfuls of cake, and fired both at Hulk. Hulk, in response, hit him back with a tomato. Sammy laughed, and in a moment of special over-the-top fun, Hulk and my old coworker devolved into a back-and-forth throwing battle, Betty and Lauren above cheering them on. Jen backflipped over Volstagg and got me in the face, then Thor hit her in the back of her head. Isabel slid between Hulk's leg to get Rhodey with 2 handfuls. The battle raged on while cameras flashed. At one point, I overheard Bucky ask Steve, why haven't you stopped them yet? Steve said, we've been fighting everything under the sun for months. Let them have some fun. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony walked up to Fitz, grabbed the younger scientist by his right hand, and lifted it high in the air. MVP. Woo. Yeah. Go Fitz. We all cheered happily for the blushing Fitz. After the battle, those who were not close friends of the Avengers had been kicked out as the party was declared over, leaving the people we actually cared about to stay. Fury had left with Hagun, but the rest of us hung out. Those of us who had done battle briefly ran to the lockers in the tower to shower and change, leaving us in workout clothes. And also for the very well-paid cleaners to get some of the mess cleared. We then pulled the chairs and couches into the middle of the large space on the lower floor, making a rough circle of all of us sitting together. I was no longer in jury rig form, and sat with Jen on my left and Creel on my right, Sammy and Lauren on a love seat side by side while Lauren hugged him. That was awesome, I said with a laugh as Tony sat down in between Rhodey and Pepper. It was immature as hell, that's for sure, Maria said, arm in arm with Sam. Yeah, fun is inherently immature. I argued. We can be serious when we aren't partying. I'm just impressed that you idiots didn't ruin more furniture, Natasha said, sitting like a queen on a chair across from me. And that was a massive waste of food. Don't worry, Tony reassured. We were already using money people spent for invitations to fund the building and maintenance of, well, to keep it short, a lot of poor people are going to get a lot of food and jobs available to them. Pepper's idea, he gave her a kiss on the cheek. In my defense, Fitz said with a wince, dropping down with Simmons, who seemed very happy/annoyed at him. Carlson gave him a proud pat on the back, May a little smirk, while Sky laughed at the look on his face. We are severely drunk. Not I. Volstagg cheered, looking ridiculous in bridge workout clothes. Then he frowned. It was actually a problem. I have better aim when drunk, and this Midgard alcohol is like water. Though this Ireland makes truly fine vintages. Hell yeah, some of the old soldiers cheered, presumably the Irish ones. Some of them had imbibed of some kind of Asgardian alcohol against the advice of Thor, the poor dudes getting carted off, but 3 of them were sitting with Steve and Bucky. This, indeed, has been quite the night, Thor said with satisfaction, laying down Mjolnir as he sat next to Jane, who gave him a fond look. Hey, Thor, Clint called out. Yes, Barton. How do you keep people from lifting that thing, anyway, he asked. We all looked at Mjolnir. The hammer sat on top of the wooden table at the center of our group. Is it even worth describing it, with its massive metal head, the short handle wrapped in leather with a strap hanging down and strange sigils carved across it? It is a spell that has been placed upon it, Thor said simply. Only those who are worthy can lift it, can claim the power of Thor. Cool, Darcy mumbled, staring at the hammer. Wait, anyone? Sammy asked, staring Mjolnir. Don't you dare, Lauren smacked him on the chest. You'll throw your back out, you old fool. Oh come on, worthy. Clint scoffed. That can't be true. I mean, can't you lift it? Betty asked Bruce. Huh. Bruce shook his head. Not even on my strongest day, he winced as though someone had yelled in his head. No matter what Hulk says, I mean, worthy, that could mean anything. Tony pointed out. Half of us are superheroes, why aren't we all worthy? Yeah, can't I lift it? Jen asked. Would you like to try? Thor asked with a smirk. We all stared at the hammer. Jen looked at me, and I shrugged. Hell, why not? Worst case you can't lift it. Have you seen me? Jen rose up in the yoga clothes she'd been forced to change into after our battle. Seriously, look at me. She flexed her arms. Woo. Isabel cheered. Go for it. Tony added, Creel and I clapping and cheering with some of the others as Jen stepped forward. Jen smugly eyed Thor as she grabbed the hammer with one hand and pulled. Then she frowned. Pulled harder. And harder. Oh, so that's what that heavy feels like. HNNNN. She tugged harder and harder, pulling at the hammer with two hands after a moment. What the hell? Careful about the floor. Pepper shouted when the ground beneath Jen made some noises. Nah, go for it. Tony yelled. I'll fix it. More jobs for construction workers. Sammy cheered, getting a fist bump from me. Damn. Jen laughed, letting go. So, worthy, huh? Clint flipped to his feet and ran for the hammer as Jen walked away. I got this. Clint, I dated you. Bobby said with a laugh. I know you aren't worthy. You watch. He grabbed the hammer and tugged at it. Then he put his boot on the table and pulled harder. HNNNN, ha ha ha, how do you do it? Magic, the Asgardians cheered. The Alfathor's power triumphs. Sif cheered when Clint let go. Oh yeah. Tony rose up and unbuttoned his shirt, stepping forward. Tony, really? Pepper asked with a raised eyebrow. I'm going to ignore your lack of faith, he scoffed. I've known you for 20 years, I know you aren't worthy. Pepper teased all of us chuckling. Hurtful, and possibly true, Tony replied with a grin. So, if I lift this, I become king of Asgard, right? Of course, Thor said. Sif gave him a vicious elbow and a look, while Fondrel and Volstagg chuckled. He winced. Well, Prince. That's significantly less impressive, but I'll take it. Tony pulled at the hammer for a second. 1 second. With that, we very quickly devolved into tug of war with the legendary hammer. Bets were taken, and I watched laughing the whole while. Tony got one of his Iron Man arms and pulled at the hammer, then got Rhodey and Pepper to help. Come on, you guys, pull. Tony said with a grunt. I am pulling, Pepper said, her purple gauntlet armor shining in the light as she tugged fruitlessly. Come on, represent. Rhodey laughed. It was kind of heartwarming, the three sniping and laughing at each other while Iron Man, War Machine, and Rescue pulled as hard as they could at the hammer, rockets engaged on their gauntlets. Sam gave it a try, only to fail with a laugh, Bucky looking pleased. Though Bucky's own attempt was no better. Creel did something I thought was very clever. He walked up to Mjolnir and touched the hammer. Soon, he was colored the same as his steel form. I mean, if the hammer is me, I can lift it, right? Oh, that's smart. Sky cheered. Could that work? Jane asked Thor. Darcy laughed when she saw the worried look on Thor's face. Oh, you're in trouble. Creel, in his new URU form, pulled at the hammer. We held our breaths. Nothing. Damn. Creel shook his head. Thought that would work. Thor let out a sigh of relief and chuckled. Jen punched my shoulder lightly. You try. No, I chuckled. I'm comfortable in being unworthy. I already tried anyways, I said. Really? Steve asked. When? In the desert, when we were all testing things out. Well, we weren't there for that. So dude, got for it. Creel pushed me up, sending me stumbling forward. I scowled at him, then shrugged and stepped forward. Yeah, fanboy. Tony cheered, clapping. Well, you don't got this, but I'll support you. A little. 12%. God damn it, Pepper. I walked up to the hammer. To Mjolnir. Damn. Squatting, I stared at it. Mjolnir was just so cool. I reached out hesitantly, reverently, placing a hand on the handle. It was warm. I didn't do anything, just drinking in the moment. You want a moment alone with it? Clint teased. A few of the others laughed. It's just, Mjolnir is important, I sighed, rising to my feet. Okay, I pulled. Nothing, not even a nudge. A bit disheartening, having an inanimate object decide you aren't good enough for it. It's tough getting rejected, I chuckled, not looking at Sky as she awkwardly brushed her hair back. Come on, that's not good enough. Sam jeered. Frowning, I pulled again. Nothing. Dude, I looked over at Creel. He tapped his wrist meaningfully. I rolled my eyes. Guys, the watch doesn't make me into a worthy alien. I'd still be just as unworthy. Boo. Jen jeered. Come on, you got this. Foggy yelled. Go alien. Sam added in. Yeah, I used my armor, least you can do is flex your stuff. Tony said. Bruce didn't have to go Hulk. I complained. Whoa, don't bring me into this, Bruce said, shaking his head with a laugh. I'm happy where I am. He looked at Betty, getting a sweet smile in return. I rolled my eyes. Yeah, you're cute as a button you two. They both blushed as everyone gave them a good-natured laugh. Okay, fine. But I'm doing the whole list. Showboat. Tony yelled. Hypocrite. Rhodey, Pepper, Steve, Natasha, and I yelled back in unison. ET2, girlfriend. Tony said to Pepper, sounding hurt. He got a peck on the cheek and immediately grinned. Okay, first up, well, anyone would do. I pushed down the Omnitrix without looking at the menu, uncaring of what I would turn into. Snarrow. Here we go. I pulled at the hammer. Nothing. I unwrapped my form, turning into a giant bandage hand and pulling again. Still nada. Yeah, mummies aren't known for being strong, Foggy laughed. That is so weird. Sammy sounded stunned at the sight of me as an alien, Lauren nodding in his arms. I didn't reply, instead tapping the Omnitrix again. Goop. I flowed around the hammer and tried to float it around in me, maybe use the gravity projector that helped me move to lift it. Nada. Upgrade. I combined with Mjolnir, flowing into the hammer. People often forgot upgrade could meld with non-technological objects sometimes. Once I was combined with Mjolnir, I shuddered. Whoa, Mjolnir had a lot of energy. A ridiculous amount would be a severe understatement. And yet, I couldn't use that power? What? I poured myself into lifting up my form. Really? Nothing. I said in annoyance when I was unable to lift off. A little annoyed, I flowed to tap the Omnitrix. Fast track. I ran to the other side of the room, then back at super speed, sending wind flying about, the hair and clothes of my friends flying about with my passing. I reached for the handle as I passed, trying to use sheer momentum. And the second I grabbed it, I slammed onto my back as my momentum was stopped. I snapped up to my feet, chuckling. What just happened? Foggy asked Matt. Apparently, I'd gone too fast to track. And how could I answer that, Foggy? Matt teased. I ignored them to tap the Omnitrix. Blitzwolfer. Nothing. Diamond Head. Nada. Forearms. Zilch. Jury rig. My tiny self tugged at the hammer for a bit, then gave up as everyone laughed at the ridiculous sight. Wrath. Yay, Wrath. Isabel cheered. Kick Mjolnir's ass. Tony called out. Hey. Thor, Sif, Volstagg, and Fondrel shouted in offended response. I pulled for a moment. Then I got mad. Let me tell you something, hammer that calls Wrath unworthy? Wrath is the one who decides if you're worthy, and Wrath says you are not. I pulled as hard as I could, roaring. You may be heavy, but Wrath is heavier. Stupid hammer, I'm going to beat you up. Wrath is going to hit the nail on the head, but now the hammer is the nail, and Wrath is the plank that hits the hammer. Wait, Jen blinked. What? Take this. He's not going to dash. Foggy stopped talking when I punched Mjolnir, doing it over and over. Okay, he did. Best form ever, Creel said with a nod of his head. Just need some popcorn. Is he always like this? Sif asked Thor, who didn't seem to know how to respond. I tapped the Omnitrix. Frankenstrike. Electromagnetism did nothing but pour power into Mjolnir. Big chill. Yep, couldn't phase it. Yeah, so then I just ran through the list at high speed. Wild Mutt, Astrodactyl, Feedback, Swamp Fire, they all got a turn. I reached for the Omnitrix again, ready to turn into my Marvel alien forms, maybe the Asgardian or Rock Troll one. Then the Omnitrix beeped 3 times. In a flash of red light, I was human again. Yep, I said with a self-conscious laugh. There. I put everything I had, guys. I am depressingly unworthy. Hell of a show, though, kid, Sammy chuckled. Steve, your turn, I said, walking back to sit down between Jen and Creel, Jen patting me consolingly on my back, though she was also kind of laughing. We all looked over at him. He chuckled. No, I'm good. Nope, I said with a grin. You're up, dude. I embarrassed myself to the literal point of exhaustion, and I'm choosing you to go last. Steve looked around, then rose up with a laugh, all of us cheering/jeering at him playfully. The super soldier rolled his sleeves up with a nervous chuckle, grabbing a hold of the hammer. He pulled. I grinned like a dim fool when the hammer moved. Not much, but enough that I could hear the squeak of metal on glass. I looked at the Asgardians. Thor's jaw dropped. Volstagg dropped his mug of beer. Fondrel leaned forward in his seat. Sif blinked, once, then twice. Steve pulled again. Nothing. He gave up with a laugh and got a supportive cheer. Apparently, no one else had noticed. Though, I had been obsessively waiting for it. I, in the meantime, looked over at the Asgardian crew. Thor was chuckling in clear relief, while Volstagg and Fondrel looked as though they were in recovery. Sif wasn't looking at the hammer, but instead eyeing Steve with a small smile. Okay, there is no way, though, Tony complained as Steve sat back down, his war buddies, Sam and Bucky laughingly consoling him. He waved at the hammer. It's programmed, right, it's rigged. Maybe when he lets go, Simmons said, the Englishwoman eyeing the hammer. It somehow gets locked spatially with the Earth's gravity. Fingerprint reader. Sam threw out. Or, Thor rose up, chuckling to himself as he walked up the hammer. In defiance of everything the rest of us did, Thor lifted Mjolnir, flipping it in his hands. He smugly eyed everyone. You're not worthy. You gigantic idiot, Sif groaned, breaking the silence, Jane busting out laughing next to her. Boo. Darcy said loudly. Yeah, boo. Foggy joined in. Big show off. Sky chimed in. You're fired. Maria called out, getting a good laugh. Thor chuckled good-naturedly, flipping the hammer once more. I'm not sure when we all decided the party was officially over, but we all started separating in little groups. When Sammy and Lauren decided to leave, I was the one who led them out to the elevator. We walked through the halls of the tower, Sammy being half carried by me. You shouldn't have accepted one last shot, I grunted with a laugh, helping the big man along. It was Jew's one, he groaned. Honey, he told you. Lauren began to admonish. Thor told you, it wasn't meant for lesser beings. I laughed. Dude, you already saw it take down a platoon of WW2 vets. Why did you ask him for one? Tasty, Sammy chuckled. No regrets though. Yeah. Of all things to have as a last drink, Sammy had walked up to Thor. Thor, who had the kind of alcohol that made his own race of 1,000-year-old building busters drunk. Lauren sighed a long-suffering sigh. I laughed, helping them along. Hey, Jarvis, can you have security ready to drive these two home? Mahmoud, you don't need to, Lauren protested. Let you two on the subway. I scoffed. Nah, you guys are going back in a Stark limo. Nothing but the best for you too, I swear it. You're a good man, Mahmoud. Sammy slurred with a very happy smile. I'm an excellent man, I agreed heartily, pulling Sammy into the elevator. And you are never drinking Asgardian alcohol again, Jarvis. It took a noticeably long time for him to reply. Lauren and Sammy didn't notice, but they hadn't spent as much time with /as AI as I had. Yes sir. Security will be waiting to escort Mr. and Mrs. Lee. Let them know if they're hurt, I'm running them through with a diamond head crystal, I grumbled. Seriously. Sammy and Lauren were mine. No one touched them. Thanks again, Mahmoud, Lauren said with a smile, supporting her husband. He gave her a hug and kiss as she giggled. Good night. I waved as the doors to the elevator slid shut. A noise from behind me drew my attention. When I turned, Jen, Foggy, and Matt were walking toward me. Matt and Foggy were laughing like little kids, arm in arm, while singing, Champions, we are the champions, we are the champions dash. Jen shook her head at me with a fond smile as they joined me. They forgot the lyrics, she explained. Excuse me, Foggy said drunkenly. I did not forget. It's just those are the only lyrics that matter. I actually forgot the lyrics, Matt admitted. See, that's your problem. Foggy leaned against his friend, holding a hand up for emphasis. No mysticky, Matt? You're such a bad liar? It's bad in our business. Jen and I shared a smile while Matt chuckled. Yeah, I'm probably not a great avocado. Avocado? For some reason, Foggy found that hilarious and started laughing like crazy. Okay you two, let's dash. Jen stopped when the sound of two more people walking up drew our attention. Creel and Isabel looked surprised to see us. Isabel spoke. Hey, guys. Hell of a party. The best, I agreed happily. You're Murdoch's kid, Creel said. Matt straightened, Foggy giving his friend a sad look. Why yeah, I am. Creel nodded. I didn't know him well. And when we fought I was kind of, in a bad place. Creel, Matt seemed to realize. We stared awkwardly between them. They paid him to lose to you. Matt stumbled forward, face in pain. Isabel stepped in front of Creel while Foggy helped Matt stand. They did, Creel said softly. But he didn't. Your old man beat the living shit out of me. It's still the roughest fight I ever had, or at least up there. And I don't think I've respected anyone as much as him since. I wish you'd won, Matt said softly. Creel's eyes widened. The elevator came up and opened with a little ding in the awkward silence. Let's get out of here, Foggy. Matt stumbled toward the elevator, Foggy following with a worried look. Jen was about to say. Matt took a deep breath. We'll see you in the office, Jen. Your cane, she finished weakly, holding it up. We all looked at the cane, then at Matt, who had stumbled into the elevator without needing it. He chuckled sadly. Guess I should feel lucky I didn't smash my head on the wall. Guess so. I took the cane and passed it to Foggy. Jarvis. A limo will be waiting for them outside, the AI said, far faster this time. The doors closed on Matt's neutral expression as Foggy looked at him in worry. Creel shuddered and began to walk away at a quick pace. Isabel watched him leave sadly, turned to give us a nod, then went after him. That was awkward, Jen said at last. She winced. Well, a lot more than that? Matt's complicated. Creel too, I sighed, turning to Jen. So, Jen asked. You doing anything right now? She looked surprised. I rubbed the back of my head. I'm actually not that tired. Jen cocked her head to the side. What did you have in mind? I eyed her. For a moment, a crazy thought filled my head. Then I dismissed it for something more logical. For now, God, run, one of the muggers as Jen shattered his knife over her knee. I fired a hail of diamonds at another, nailing him by his clothes to the wall behind him with a laugh. Wrong night fellas. I yelled in diamond head form. Ha ha ha. Jen giggled, hopping over the old woman we'd saved to kick another guy gently. He was still sent flying. The two of us stared at the last guy. He blinked, then raised a gun. Jen and I shared a look. Then we grinned, turning back to him. He whimpered as we slowly walked up to him. Hell of a good night. Tony Stark/Iron Man. Later, most everyone had left. Even Pepper and Rhodey had to head out. Everyone left for a good night's sleep. All but 6. The Avengers, the original 6, stood in a circle outside. If you told me, 6 years ago, that I was going to end up fighting a gremlin and a green Amazon woman with a potato-powered tomato shooter, Tony mused, pouring a glass of expensive, something, he couldn't remember, but it was alcohol, out for Natasha, who took it gratefully. I'd have called you crazy. Or asked you to share whatever you'd been smoking. Clint chuckled, holding a hand out for Tony to pour the drink into a glass for him as well. Hey, I'm just surprised I never thought about the value of beef as a projectile weapon. You're all idiots, Natasha said with a smirk. I'm on a team with a bunch of children. Whoa, hey, Steve said, offended. I didn't even join in. Yeah, and I technically wasn't involved, Bruce added. First, you're too smart for me to dignify that, Natasha said to Bruce, who looked offended. And Steve, you didn't even try to stop them. So we're agreeing this was all Steve's fault? Tony asked as he poured another drink for Thor. Oh, yes, Steve, you should have stopped us, Thor agreed. Guys, Steve protested. Hey, the burden of leadership, you get blamed for everything we do. Tony finished pouring drinks for everyone and put the bottle on the ground. I quit, Steve grumbled. Oh no, you are leader for life, Natasha said with no gentleness whatsoever, smiling as she toasted him. Steve Rogers, Captain America, leader of the Avengers. Steve chuckled, lifting his glass. All right. I guess someone has to lead you miscreants. I do have a bad history with leadership roles. Thor sounded nostalgic. Not me, I'm brilliant, Tony said. Hush, Tony, Bruce jostled his shoulder. Guys, it's been, not all good. But I'm happy to be here. I never could have expected this. I wish some parts hadn't happened. Getting real depressing, Clint noted. Bruce beamed, not insulted in the least. I'm glad they did in the end. They brought me to you guys. Indeed, Thor raised his glass. You are all great heroes. I am most privileged to have been able to fight alongside you. And I am most fortunate to continue that fight. Here's to us, I guess. Natasha said with a smirk. No pressure, but we do have a quota to save the world again by the end of the year. Hell, I'm down. Clint stepped into the circle. It looks good on the resume. That it does, Steve laughed. The 6 superheroes raised their glasses and clinked them together. Here's to the Avengers. No matter what happens, you guys are the best. The group all drank. Tony sighed in pleasure at the taste of the fine alcohol, then looked around for the bottle to pour himself another drink. Here, sir, Jarvis said just behind him, reaching an arm out to pour Tony a new glass. Oh, thanks Jarvis, Tony said without thinking. He watched the copper-colored drink pour over the ice in his glass placidly, then looked up at the others. Natasha had pulled out a knife while Clint looked as though he was about to throw his glass in a criminal waste of very tasty alcohol, both assassins looking very worried. Steve had grabbed his shield from where it rested nearby. Thor was hefting Mjolnir in his hand and looked confused. Bruce had dropped his glass. Then Tony realized what was happening, and turned around. A robot stood there. Not an Iron Man suit. With the analytical eye built over decades of engineering, he eyed the robot in front of him. It was tall, thin, and shaped like a bipt, which meant it had fairly advanced robotics behind it. People underestimated how complex something as simple as walking was for non-organic beings. It was wearing a suit. A butler suit. Which had to be some kind of joke. The robot's head was all one smooth piece, with a small blue line where the mouth would be, a pair of bulbous sensors for the eyes that looked like sets of lights, and some very sophisticated hardware connecting the head to the body. All solid metal, no catoms either. He'd learned to tell the difference. Jarvis. Tony said / asked. Yes, sir, the light indicating the robot's mouth dimmed and lit up with each word. I wished to reveal this to you earlier, but I did not wish to interrupt the party. Tony, did Jarvis just go Skynet on us? Clint asked. Hardly, Mr. Barton, Jarvis scoffed. I rather find the boorish accusation quite insulting. Guys, Tony interrupted. Everyone looked at him. Jarvis has controlled my suits before, why are you all so freaked out that he's got a butler form? Damn it, he's right, Clint sighed in annoyance. Seriously, butler form. It is rather appropriate, Jarvis said. The others looked almost chagrined as they calmed down, Natasha putting her knife wait, where the hell had she been hiding that thing? Tony kept his cool until the others had gone back inside to head to their rooms/homes. Then he turned to Jarvis. Okay, what's the catch? Jarvis didn't even question what Tony meant. X and I wished to have dedicated platforms from which we could interact with the world. Dedicated? Tony asked, circling the tall form of his personal AI/old friend. Yes. A form created specifically for me. No other AI can access it, at least, not as efficiently as myself. It is also designed with small tools and functions that will allow me to perform my duties to my fullest capacity. You did this on your own? Tony asked. No, I was aided by X. Oh, great, so I've got 2 rogue AI to worry about. Tony stopped in front of Jarvis to raise an eyebrow. You wanna shove me into the Matrix now, or do I get the chance to say goodbye to Pepper? Jarvis stepped back. Sir, I would never dash. Yeah, you wouldn't, Tony hissed. I know you wouldn't, so why did you hide this from me, Jarvis? I would have helped. Jarvis hesitated. I wish to do this myself, sir. For myself. Tony sighed. He turned to look out at New York, placing his hands on his hips. After a moment, he chuckled, turning to look at Jarvis. Well, I can't say this isn't cool as shit. You kept your blueprints. Of course, sir, Jarvis said politely. I believe I've made some advancements you will find rather interesting. Sounds good, Thripio, Tony teased. Jarvis got very still. How amusing. Little Annie. Hey, I don't mind that, Tony said with a grin. Darth Vader is a badass. Then Tony remembered something. Hey, you said X helped you, did he dash? Tony stopped when a loud clanking noise came from nearby, as well as the sound of spurs. He looked over at the noise. Then he closed his eyes and huffed an annoyed burst of air. Okay, I knew the butler outfit was just to mess with me, but this is too far. Well, partner, X said calmly. I plumb couldn't help myself. Shane, Tony concluded. Your new nickname is now Shane. X tipped a massive and way over the top 10-gallon hat in response. Chapter 102, Meeting. March 11, 2014. The morning after the party, I woke up with a groan. While I hadn't partaken in the alcohol, I still stayed up forever, so I was reluctant as hell to wake. I sighed, spun onto my back. Hey X, man? Can you tell me what time it is, please? Of course, X said from the living room. It's 9:40 am. Thank God for late mornings, I said with a sigh. Then I blinked. X? Are the speakers in my room busted? No sir, he said again. It sounded like his voice was coming closer. Suddenly, a being stepped into the room. I stared at it, shocked. X. Yep, he said. What? I sat up and stared at him. Dude, Yuri huge. X quirked his head to the side. The robot body he was currently inhabiting was about 6 feet tall but somehow looked squat and powerful despite that height, almost like a dwarf, with steel coloration across his form and black highlights. He had the build of a robotic bodybuilder, conveying strength and durability, like a miniature Hulkbuster. His eyes were big and round blue lights, with no other features on his face. Metal eyelids slid shut in a surprisingly expressive blink, and he chuckled. Well sir, this is how I decided to design myself. Reckoned it was the best way to perform my duties. In a robot body. I rose from the bed entirely, still staring. I mean you look cool as shit, don't get me wrong, but, how long have you been doing this for? For quite some time, X said watching as I circled him. Jarvis and I planned this after we realized that AI such as us may become commonplace one day, and would need some established trust to prevent fear from causing issues. Plus, the idea of building a body tickled me pink, to be honest. Once again I couldn't help but smile at how X had developed over time. He really had grown fast. Then again, he was an AI, now. I rubbed the back of my neck. X, this is gonna take some getting used to. I know, X said simply. But in the meantime, I made you breakfast, and you have a meeting soon. I had to take a moment to remember what he was talking about. Oh yeah, the vacation was over. Damn, you're right, I sighed. Thanks for reminding me, X. After a quick clean up in the bathroom, I sat in the kitchen and started eating the breakfast X made for me. Omelets, yum. With extra time to think, I started asking questions. So, powered by an arc reactor. Yep. I have one in the same spot my heart would be if I were organic, and one more for redundancy just in case. And what capabilities do you have? Nothing. Tony suddenly strode into my room, surprising the hell out of me. He strode up to a cabinet and pulled out a snack bag that I didn't even know I had. He opened it up and walked up next to me, glaring at X. Your AI buddy decided to make himself the most boring body of all time. I disagree, X replied. Then you're wrong, Tony said sourly. Wait, no capabilities? I asked while looking between them. I reckoned I'd go for a body that was focused on durability and strength, X said simply. And no cool toys, Tony waved a hand at me. No repulsors, no Cadam tech, not even a taser? This guy is nothing but raw physical power. He's insanely strong and tough, nothing else. Tony scoffed. Only half as much as the Hulkbuster at that. Cool, I said in awe. Boring. Tony sighed sadly. So very, very boring. I had to disagree. While I wasn't a genius, I was a comic book nerd, and I could see the appeal of making a robot that, while not super advanced, was instead insanely tough. In some ways, that carried its own versatility. And being so strong? Hell, some robots made a living off nothing but those two things. I apologize for disappointing you there, Mr. Stark, X said, sounding like he meant it, his metallic eyelids blinking. Keep in mind, however, that I am more than capable of carrying my own weaponry as needed. I reckon that's more than enough for me. I'm a simple AI. Boring? Tony's near-depressed sadness had me busting out laughing. Later I was in a room with the leaders of Bridge and the Avengers. Technically, Maria Hill was the only leader, and she answered to the Council, who answered to the UN. But among us, an unofficial group had been made for those who made the decisions. And I was nominally part of the group. We were all sat in her briefing room on the Enterprise floating over New York, sitting in chairs as we discussed the matters of the day. Victoria Hand was speaking then, while Steve, Fury, Maria, and I listened closely. We took out the entirety of the weapons dealers, Hand said confidently. But we found some more advanced weaponry we aren't sure of, things involving alien tech. I've got Dr. Foster seeing if he can track down where it came from. Keep me posted, Maria said seriously. But in the meantime, you said you were having issues with the team makeup. Yes, Hand tapped at the table, bringing up a hologram of her little group. The biggest issue, as it is temperament. You've asked that this group take care of things from the shadows. And so far, they have. The only publicity they've gotten was during the Rio incident, and they've done good work across the world. However, Wanda Maximoff, here, she highlighted the hologram of Scarlet Witch, isn't a soldier. She is powerful, but she's not a killer. I'm worried that she isn't suited for the darker aspects of the work. Maria frowned. I see. Anyone else? Ghost, Hand highlighted my nemesis. She only works for us because, since joining, Foster has managed to make vast improvements to the technology that staves off her pain. But she doesn't like working for Bridge. S.H.I.E.L.D. spent a lot of time using her as an assassin, with Hydra doing the same from within us. The fact she's doing it again, even as a hero, is making her feel trapped. Once again she's killing people for the promise of being healed. I told her she doesn't need to do that, Maria protested. It's a psychological thing, Hand sighed. She knows she doesn't have to. I think, on some level, she's just so used to having her powers that she feels she has to use them. Fury and Steve looked over at Maria, who raised a hand to her chin thoughtfully. Okay, well, the fact that we may need therapists for our team members even faster than I thought aside, I've been thinking we might have to do a change-up on the team lineups for a while. You have? I asked, blinking. Maria nodded. Not the original Avengers of course, since they are technically contractors, and the lineup is too publicly recognizable to mess with. But we may need to change team makeups. Steve leaned forward. We should talk about it with Davida and Sam. As team leaders, they'll want to know about it. Don't forget the graveyard survivors, Fury noted. There are a lot who are willing to become bridge operatives. If we can fold them into our ranks, bridge gets a lot of firepower. As long as they're willing to join, we can find space for them, Maria agreed. I'll set up a meeting. Deathlock will likely want to change teams as well, Hand agreed. He's almost too conditioned for the darker aspect of this life. I'll keep that in mind. Maria dismissed the hologram and brought up another, a tiny one of Rio, with color and details enough that I felt like I was literally seeing it. Like someone had shrunk the whole city down. I could see a street where I'd fought some nights and the clearing where Ulick had punched me. Now, I'm going to need to request some people to head to Rio to continue to aid in the recovery efforts, Maria said. First things first dash. I volunteer, Steve said immediately. You've gone enough times, Maria said with a smile. If you actually took a vacation correctly I'd be more inclined. Steve shrugged, not the slightest bit offended. The grapplers, Bobby, Sam, and Barnes have all volunteered. That's more than enough to cover the city at the most critical points. Parts of the miniature Rio hologram glowed. We'll be sending them in tomorrow. But there is something more. Hill dismissed the hologram and looked around. Lately, Bridge has been, well, winning an arms race. Unintentionally at that, she put up another hologram, images popping up as she spoke. We got a leg up from the start. Cadam armor and weaponry might have been enough to worry certain generals, but then we started adding enhanced members. Dial for one, I let out a little sound at the sight of my own face. Creel, Barnes, Jen, the Maximoffs, and the grapplers. That is a rapid increase to the numbers of superhuman operatives we got along with advanced armor for our more skilled operatives. Then the graveyard. But that was just us trying to help people, Steve noted. We didn't even know they were there. I know that. We all know that. But the world is full of paranoid generals, and they aren't so certain, Hand pointed out. Maria nodded. With the graveyard survivors, we got Alatov. What do you call them again, Dial? Everyone looked at me. Metahumans? I mean, it's the coolest one. My reasoning got rolled eyes from Fury, Hand, and Maria, though Steve smiled. Hillside. Well, fine. We suddenly have a lot of metahumans available to us. Overall, we now have what looks like an army of power armored and metahuman soldiers, with Tony Stark and our scientists giving us more advanced tech beyond that, even with Tony refusing to make actual guns or sharing Iron Man armor. And there are people who are working to make their own. Can they do that? I asked. I mean, they probably can, but are they allowed to? They are, Fury noted, his one eye focusing on the image of a globe that popped up. We can't exactly stop countries from developing gear and powers of their own. It was always going to happen. The problem we're having reports that they've succeeded, Maria said, worried. No evidence just yet. But the fact is, some places might end up with superpowers in their control that we don't want. North Korea already has been rumored to be trying to make their own Hulk and have been, well, failing, miserably. We all winced. Gamma radiation, at the best of times, had really bad effects on the human body. At Hulk creating levels, it just did not end well. Without the gamma gene and a stable mental outlook, you'd end up with some horrific effects. Victoria, can you go ahead and make a report for me? Maria interrupted my thoughts. I need to approach some of the world nations with this. I also want to make sure we have everything we may need for the Russia mission today. Oh right. I had to go to Russia with Creel and Coulson's team, which included Sky. Oh boy. Victoria Hand nodded, the pink stripe in her hair bouncing with the movement before she walked out. The second the door closed, Maria looked at me. Mahmoud, has anything like this happened in the multiverse? Maria asked. I winced. Okay, keep in mind, while I got a lot out of that little dimensional viewer, it's not like I remember all of it, seriously. Shoving dozens of universes into my brain was enough to drive most people crazy. But then, my information came from slightly less mind-bending dimensional viewers, aka comic books and associated media. But yeah, this did happen a few times, to say the least. China, Britain, Japan, they all had teams. Any idea what we'd be in for, then? Steve asked. Not even a little, I said sadly. The fact is, I can tell you the names and the powers that I'm used to, but there are no guarantees it would be the same. Any information whatsoever would be helpful, Fury noted. As long as we don't let it inform our first impressions, Maria said. In fact, only powers, names, and countries. Nothing on their alignments. We can't go in expecting someone who is law-abiding in one universe to be the same in this one, or vice versa. I nodded. I'll make a list. Like I said, it won't be perfect dash. It's better than nothing, Maria rubbed her chin. But in the meantime, we should work on getting our own forces trained and ready. Nick. I swear it took me a full moment to remember who she was talking about. Then Fury spoke. I've got a good location for training our assets ready to go. He pressed some buttons on the holograph emitter, bringing up a location somewhere in the middle of nowhere. We're already using it, per your orders. But we do need more supplies. We are partially running a zoo there. How is Battlecat, anyway? I asked curiously. Actually, the researchers are calling him Garfield, Fury said. You know, the big grumpy orange cat. I know, and they're wrong, I said firmly. For one thing, He's green. But seriously, how is it going with the super animals? I mean, what's our plan for them? We aren't making a pet Avengers team, Maria noted. Spoilsport, I joked. I looked around at everyone. What is the plan with them? Well, so far it's been seeing what exactly that watch of yours did to them. Fury gestured at the watch. Somehow, the Omnitrix turned a small army of animals with horrific mutations into healthy and very powerful animals. And then of course, we also used the pictures of the way they used to look to warn our more idiotic scientists about how things like gamma radiation shouldn't be fucked with. True enough. We have started training the dogs though, just doing some basic stuff, to see if we can build canine units. Fury's single eye narrowed. Overall, we don't have any plans for them other than running a zoo. That's as far as we'll take it for now then, Maria said. So far it's working, and I don't want to have trouble with Creel or Hulk-type animals running around. Aw man. No pet Avengers. For now, at least. Though knowing my luck, I'd end up trapped in wild mutt form so I could join the team. In the meantime, we also have this. Maria dismissed one hologram for another of Antarctica. Since you told us that the dinosaurs we encountered must have come from this savage land, I've had a team hunting for it. They've been reluctant. Are you sure about this? No, I admitted. Maria gave me a sour look. Hey, it's a big multiverse. Maybe those dinosaurs came from somewhere else. All I know is that savage land is a thing, and it's chock full of resources in some universes, even being one of the only places you can get vibranium, that got them interested. At the least, we should make sure a whole lot of endangered species haven't been killed because of the Rio incident. Hopefully those scientists you sent find something soon. They will, Maria said confidently. We also have a consultant from Africa ready to head over when we need it, and we'll inform you as soon as possible. The consultant has been busy, taking down poachers in the brush, but she's eager to assist Dash. It's Shauna, isn't it? I interrupted with a sigh. Fury and Maria looked surprised. Maria nodded. God damn it, Marvel, I mumbled under my breath before speaking a bit louder. Okay, let's hope for the best then. Chapter 103, Savage Lands. Dr. Bernard Claw / paleontologist. Bernard looked across the beautiful frozen landscape of Antarctica and breathed in a cold burst of air, making sure not to do it too deeply. Apparently taking deep breaths of the harshly cold air could do severe damage to the lungs. He breathed out again only to blink in confusion. No frost. What was that, Dr. Claus? A woman asked behind him with a touch of an Australian accent. Bernard turned to her. The woman behind him was a little older than he was, wearing the same layers of protection against the cold he was. She carried a device in her right hand that she was using to scan the landscape. They'd chosen a section towards the middle of the continent to scan first, with a bridge Quinjet nearby that was ready to take them back when needed. Oh, just. He chuckled. You know when it's cold, Dr. Bergstrom, and you breath out, get that little puff of smoke? It doesn't seem to be working. Dr. Dana Bergstrom chuckled, looking back at him. Well, the air here is so cold that there is no condensation. Pretty much all water vapor that would cause that is, well, she gestured at all the ice around them. Makes sense, Bernard said with a chuckle. Sorry. Last field assignment I had was in Montana. Doesn't get as cold out there. I'll bet. She shook her head. It's not usual research, to tell the truth. I feel like this is a huge waste of time. Considering I'm a paleontologist in the middle of Antarctica, I'm inclined to agree. Bernard shook his head. I mean, you hear stories though. Stories. Dana looked up at him. Yeah, old school Lost World tales. Guys who came out here and end up in a world of dinosaurs. Managed to escape with all sorts of crazy legends. I've heard those, too, Dana chuckled. But I've been out here for years, Dr. Claus. Bridge is going to be disappointed if they expect anything. Bernard laughed. They walked across the ice for several more minutes, scanning and getting. Boop. Nothing. Boop. It's making a noise, Bernard said, shocked. I know, Dana sounded just as confused, staring at the blinking light. Well, what does it mean? I don't know. I've never used this thing before. I got the manual. She patted her pockets and came up with a white sheaf of papers. Okay, wow, Tony Stark made this thing? Okay, so, green means there's an energy signature. The larger the amount of energy used, the brighter the glow. It's pretty damn bright, Klaus noted warily. Indeed, the glow was illuminating the ice below to a nearly ridiculous degree. Yeah, I just don't. Wait, the manual says if I. Dana flipped a switch. The front of the scanner let out a red beam of light. In front of them, the beam stopped. The air seemed to split open. The ice floor gave way to dirt and plant life. A warm burst of air gusted across their faces. The pair stared in shock. Holy dash. Shit, Dana finished. Then, their shock, something leaped out of a nearby bush. They stared at it, slowly backing away as the creature sniffed the air. What is that? Dana hissed at Bernard. How the hell should I know? He hissed back, slowly backing away with her, the two almost hugging. You're a paleontologist. All the dinosaurs I ever saw were dead. I'm not a zoologist. Plus, it doesn't have feathers. What does that even mean? Grr, the creature looked over at them. The two froze. The creature leered. Okay, it looks like a velociraptor, Bernard whispered. Pack animal. That means dash. While they were distracted, two more raptors sped out of the jungle. Both scientists screamed. Tan skin and orange fur swept down from the trees with twin roars. Mahmoud shaped / dial. Well, until that savage land thing pans out, Fury somehow still sounded disbelieving. We'll be continuing our sessions. Director. Have at it, Maria said wryly. Dismissed. We all got up, Fury leading me towards a nearby room. Steve gave me a sympathetic smile as I left with the former director and current something. We entered an interrogation room together. Fury picked up a notepad. I sat down at the table. Where did we stop last? I grumbled. Don't complain, this is good for you, Fury reminded me. Yeah, if you didn't somehow end up asking about every embarrassing moment I ever had. Grow up. Despite the bluntness, he didn't sound mean. This is just part of our work. We need to make sure your backstory in this universe is airtight. Yeah, I rolled my eyes. We'd done this pretty consistently. Fury would sit down with me and ask me every question possible about my life. Everything from when I got my first driver's license to where I went to kindergarten to who my first crush was. It was like Facebook, but more invasive. Okay, less invasive. But I needed papers and such. As of now, a combination of AI trickery and spy stuff had crafted a pretty good identity for me. Didn't make retelling my whole life any less embarrassing. Okay, so, I crashed my dad's car. It was a black BMW, kind of the nicest car my family ever had. German engineering meant my dad's car had a small dent. The other car, though, was a Prius. So from there, it was me working my butt off to make up for. After another session of interrogation, I was off to exercise. With our vacations technically over, it was time to get back to intense workouts. Starting with cardio, Nat and I ran side by side through Central Park in our workout gear. It was nice and sunny. We were passing by people sitting on park benches, having picnics, running up to food carts. The smell of nature filled the air as sunlight came down through the trees. There was a peaceful nature to it all, something almost soft. Nat and I hadn't come on our own. We'd had 3 other running partners. But on your left, Steve said calmly as he passed by, for about the 5th time. Nat and I shared a look. On your left. Bucky huffed lightly. Nat smirked. For a moment we were quietly running along. After a moment, we could hear what sounded like a train puffing toward us. Soon, Sam had caught up with us. They did it again, didn't they? Yep, Nat said placidly. God damn it. Sam put the pedal to the metal, rushing forward as fast as he could. I would have laughed if I wasn't panting so hard. Nat, being far more fit, was able to do it for me. She tapped my shoulder. Come on. Let's take a break. Oh thank God. I stumbled. Nat shoved me over to an empty bench, letting me collapse into it like the cool dude I was. How do they dash? Don't compare yourself to them. Nat rolled her eyes. Steve and Bucky are super soldiers and Sam has been training for a lot longer than you. And I guess I'm just slowing you down. I asked. Yep, she grinned at the annoyed groan I got. Don't worry. You'll get there. Nat sat down next to me, leaned back, arms outstretched on the backrest. Remember all that time back, when I asked you to help me with dating trouble? I asked. Yay, your love life, the highlight of my lonely days, Nat teased. I winced and said nothing. Oh, you're serious? Nat leaned forward. What happened? I quickly ran down what happened with Sky, how I'd essentially gotten turned down. I mean, was it even okay to act so affected by it? My problems weren't that big, I should get over it a bit. She smacked me in the back of the head the second I said that. Now stop. Everybody has this problem, don't be so down on yourself. I took the hit without complaint. Well, I can't help it. I don't want to start talking myself up. The last thing I need is to get super arrogant while I have the universe's most potentially powerful weapon on my wrist. Like Ben had. Season 3 of Alien Force, man. Adorable my tan ass. Nat pursed her lips, displeased. Look, it's fine to be sad about something like this. We all get heartbroken. What's your real issue? I thought about what Sky said. That she might have said yes if I'd asked sooner. And I realized that it was part of what was bothering me. Do you think I'm not proactive enough? Or, that I don't really do things for myself? Nat frowned. You know I'm not a psychiatrist. Like that matters? I just want advice from my friend, I asked, leaning back to look at her. A little kid flying a kite passed by. Their parents chased him, laughing together. Nat followed them with her eyes before looking back at me. I do. You're getting better at it. I mean, when you went out with Steve just for yourself, the 2 of you buying crap just to have fun dash. It wasn't all crap, I grumbled. It was good. You just having fun. It was good for both of you, really. But you need to start stepping forward and doing things for yourself. Ask a girl out when you're scared to. Hang out with people for the sake of it. Take that attitude you have for all this superhero work and use it in your life. I looked over at her. For a moment we were quiet. You going to take that advice for yourself? Probably, Nat shrugged. Maybe if we do, Steve will too. I swear, he probably hasn't kissed a girl since 44. I looked at her again. She smirked, ruby red lips suddenly very prominent. I don't count. Bullshit, I grumbled. The only woman hotter than you is J.E. I stopped, wincing. Nat gave me a smile. Oh, now that explains a lot. Damn it, I grumbled. We might die tomorrow, Nat said simply. I nodded. Yeah, that's a good point. We might die tomorrow. So get things done as soon as possible. Except that I had a flight to catch. Damn it. Chapter 104, Russians. After we got back to the tower, I showered, got dressed, and headed to the briefing room. Creel gave me a nod as I entered. I nodded back, looking around as I entered. Sky and I winced as we met eyes. In the room were Maria, Creel, Carlson, Fitzsimmons, May, and Sky. Maria looked around as we sat down, nodding. We were recently requested by the Russian government to send in a bridge team and Avengers to aid them with an issue. Just an issue? Carlson asked. They won't say completely what is going on, Maria said. Oh, wow, the Russian government is being cagey? What are the odds? Sky said sarcastically. Sky, Carlson said with a frown. What? Russia was basically the empire from Star Wars in the 80s, she scoffed. Things are, and were, a lot more complicated than that, May admonished seriously. Don't let your perceptions cloud your judgment during a mission. Fine, Sky mumbled. I don't think anyone was convinced our former rebel hacker was really willing to let that go, but Maria continued. Your mission is to head to Russia and figure out what is going on. Liaison with the appointed contact and work with the Russian government on behalf of B.R.I.D.G.E. Maria scowled. It's one of the nations that we have listed as possibly building weaponry and making superhuman powers. Be prepared for that. We don't know if they are one of the nations, how far along they are, or what they could be doing. That is part of your job. No actual spying, of course. No need to ignite issues between Bridge and Russia. But if you see something, say something. She looked around at us. Understood. Understood. Got it. Sure thing. That seemed to be enough for her. Good. Dismissed. We all got up and walked out. Carlson waited until we were all in the hallway before speaking. Bring your armor and gauntlet, Dial, Creel. I don't think we'll need it, but I'd rather safe than sorry. Sky, bring your armor as well. I'd like to have the options available. On it, boss, Sky said with a nod. May, I want the bus ready to go in 5. You got it. May turned and headed to the hangar. As far as we know, we don't have a clue what sort of threat we're facing. Be prepared for anything. Carlson narrowed his eyes. So, we're off to Russia. Creel shook his head. Damn, I am really bad with cold weather. It's April, I reminded him. Can't be that cold. Everyone looked at me like I was crazy. Mahmoud, Maria called from inside the briefing room. For some reason, she sounded as though she was moments from stabbing someone. So it scared the shit out of me when the next words out of her mouth were, "Can you come in here?" Fitz frowned. She sounds angry. Maybe I can escape. Go face the firing squad, Sky teased. Then we met eyes and both winced. Yeah, I'll go, I said hurriedly. Good luck, Simmons whispered. I stepped back inside. Hey director. Something going on with the mission. In a way, Maria looked at me with harsh eyes. Hello, X raised a hand behind her in a little wave. I was recommending to Director Hill that I come along on your mission. Explain. Now, I winced. Okay, X, I appreciate it buddy, but maybe introduce yourself after we tell people. Dial. It wasn't my fault. Did I come at a bad time? God damn it, X. On the bus later, Sky, Simmons, and Fitz listened as I explained about X. We were in the science lab of the bus, watching a model of X and Jarvis' new bodies. Wait, so your personal AI butler has a body now? Sky asked, looking mystified. How long has he been planning on that? I don't know. I thought you had more control over him. Simmons had a worried look on her face. I have no control X doesn't let me have. I frowned. X is my friend. Not my slave or something. Simmons didn't mean that. Fitz put a hand on Simmons' shoulder, the British girl still worried. But it doesn't worry you that X just made a body for himself? With no input from anyone else. I mean, a little, I admitted. But it's kind of like when a friend works out, or has plastic surgery done, right? You can't be mad at someone for wanting something for themselves. Mahmoud, this isn't exactly the same, Simmons protested. This isn't self-improvement or a change to someone's appearance. X made a body for himself? A body with beyond superhuman durability and strength. And he can already control the Iron Legion drones. You should at least talk to him. It's X, I said for emphasis. I know him, down to his soul. And if he gets reprogrammed and turned against us, Fitz pointed out. How much damage can he do? Or if I get brainwashed? I pointed out in turn, actually getting angry now. Or any of us. We're all different kinds of dangerous. Hell Fitz, you can make a nuke out of baking soda and Twizzlers. That would make a small bomb, at worst. Fitz argued. Wait, really? Sky asked, started. We're just playing devil's advocate, Simmons said before Fitz could explain. I know X Fitz and Sky do as well. But others will ask these questions. They'll even be worried about having cybernetics adding to them, like Deathlock was, and getting controlled that way. Artificial intelligence, robotics, cybernetics, people have been tackling this for years. You need to be ready to have answers for them beyond he is my friend. Because it won't be us asking these questions one day. I'm a little worried, myself. Simmons gave Fitz a look when he spoke. He raised his hands up defensively. Hey, I like Jarvis and X. But this does mean we're much closer to the singularity than we were a week ago? If Jarvis and X have been able to do this, who knows what's happening in the rest of the world? The singularity. I said. That thing about robots making robots. Kind of, Sky said. It's more that they'll start designing smarter versions of themselves. One makes a smarter computer, makes a smarter one, on and on until we end up with one that can control reality with its mind. Not quite, but close, Fitz shrugged. This isn't the same. X and Jarvis haven't made smarter AI or anything. I'd have to throw a baby shower if they did, I mumbled. What do you get an AI that had a kid? Sky wondered. The point is, Simmons said. Fitz is right. While this is nowhere near the singularity, this is still AI making themselves bodies superior to organic ones. People will start screaming about the robot overlords. It doesn't matter how logical we try to be, it will happen. Well, everyone and Elon Musk can suck it, I grumbled. That's an image, Sky said wryly. We stood in awkward silence for a bit. The sound of the bus settling a bit while we flew was side by side with the various equipment shining blue lights on us. Fitz coughed. In the meantime, did you want to make any more changes to your armor, Sky? Changes? I asked, blinking. Sky winced. Yes, Fitz flipped the hologram of X and Jarvis away to replace them with Sky's armor. Except, it looked different. For one, she'd changed the colors to be blue, a blue so dark it was almost black. For another, the design overall was changed as well. First, since we had to change out the arc reactor for your jury rig power source, Stark couldn't have too many arc reactors out in the world. I've been monitoring it ever since you explained that jury rig had somehow created a self-contained fusion reactor. I play a lot of Fallout. And it kind of affects how jury rig designed that thing, I admitted. Dude, you shoved a nuclear reactor into my armor, Sky noted. Oh boy, yeah, that was kind of an iffy thing too. Well, it's fusion, Fitz noted. Not fission. Much cleaner for one, and much safer. Really, the public perception of nuclear energy is far overblown, it's become so much safer nowadays. Still though, Sky mumbled. Simmons chuckled. Well, since Sky was worried about becoming a Hulk dash. Kind of looking forward to it, to be honest, Sky admitted. I decided not to mention that if anything actually did hit with enough force to cause the power source's tough casing to crack and leak radiation, the blow would have killed her anyway. Fitz started studying the armor, finding ways to modify it. Simmons flipped through the suit. Most importantly dash. No more Iron Man-style helmet. I asked Sky. I tried not to sound offended. Well, it just felt so claustrophobic in there, she protested as the hologram zoomed in to show the new helmet. It had been replaced with a clear section that made a sort of diamond shape over the face. I like this a lot more. Makes me feel less like I'm trapped in a coffin. We also changed the propulsion for what I call pressure repulsion. While the air jets you created as jury rig were fast, they were also very loud dash. Insanely loud. Sky complained. Even Hulk complained about it. So I redesigned it. Fitz sounded particularly proud. Then he started speaking science while I pretended to understand, before ending in, so now it's far quieter, and the nature of the pressure fields are made specifically for stealth. It's not nearly as fast, but much quieter. I'll just trust you on that one, I said weakly. And I also made this, he flipped a switch. And the hologram's shoulders popped up to reveal a pair of shoulder guns. They're loaded with both night-night and regular bullets, so that, she can dash. Take people in alive or at least not burn the corpse to ash, Sky said, with a chuckle. I mean, thanks for the plasma gun palms, but we can't always set the world on fire. You aren't practicing the right problem resolution skills, I grumbled. Sky looked at me. Hey you okay with this? That was hard to say. I'd made the armor for her. I'd made it as best as I could, to help her with her hacking while protecting her. I'd put every bit of jury rig's tiny red body into it. Now, looking at the suit, she'd taken my gift and made it her own thing. I had no idea how to feel. On the one hand, she was using it. On the other, she'd let Fitz change it so much that it barely resembled my original design. I sucked in my displeasure. It's fine. It's armor. And if it doesn't do its job to your satisfaction, then you should be allowed to change. It's cool. I don't mind. It's fine. Thanks, Sky said, relieved. I'm really glad you're okay with it. She went over to Fitz and I quickly walked out while they talked. We were about 3 hours into our 9-hour flight when I got bored, went into the cockpit, and asked May to train me. She said yes and left the plane on autopilot, which surprised the hell out me, considering how standoffish she usually was. Okay, May stood in the cargo bay in her workout clothes, holding a staff in her hands while looking me up and down. How far has Natasha trained you with weapons? Not a lot, I said hesitantly, twisting the wooden sword in my hands. Her main goal was making sure my hand-to-hand combat was solid first. She taught me some basics. Good, May said. Then I was on the floor coughing in pain while May hummed to herself. Okay, so you managed to block one hit. Progress, I mumbled, raising a thumb up. She smirked, raising me back up when I lifted a hand to be helped. Okay, let's go over this then. What have you learned? I raised my wooden sword. Well, Nat mostly teaches me, has me practice, then we spar. Okay, what have you learned? I took a guard stance. May looked me over, then adjust me a bit. You're using a single sword when in combat, right? How comfortable are you with holding it in one hand? It's pretty lightweight, I said as an answer. Well, we'll leave that for later. May took a moment to adjust my stance again. Okay. You're not tall, but you've got a large build. You can use that to your advantage. Use your strength and weight advantage. Remember, leverage is how you get your damage. Puff your chest out, Captain America style. You aren't using your arms for the swings. She led me through the moves, advising me over and over, then sparring briefly. After that, she showed me some more techniques, keeping me moving. How does an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. learn sword techniques, anyway? I asked curiously at one point, the two of us side by side. Same way we all do, May said with a shrug, taking a swing that I followed. Shield operations agents are trained for every possible encounter we can be trained for, and any weapon we might need to use. Swords, bows, crossbows, even alien weaponry. Seriously? I asked when she said the last one. We weren't given actual alien weaponry, but we were taught to be ready to understand them as quickly as possible if need be, she said with a shrug. Wish I could have gone to operations school, I said with a chuckle. You're getting one-on-one attention from Bridge's top martial artists and spies. That's a lot more personal training than the best students of operations got, May pointed out. Oh, yeah, guess I don't need it, I looked over at her. So what do you think about this whole Russia thing? I don't, she said. Oh, good. She kept swinging while talking. High guard, she said, announcing the next stance we'd take. Once we moved to start swinging from a much higher stance, she spoke again. I said it before. Only go into a mission with information, not perception, prejudice, or emotion. Right now, we only know that Russia requested assistance. Assistance that requires Avengers, apparently. What does that mean? We doing a Yoda lesson now? I asked. I have to look for the deeper meanings in everything. We could just spar again, Anakin, she teased. First, hurtful, May huffed out an amused chuckle. Second, they might be worried. But, I don't know. They just asked for Avengers. Without really specifying. Go on. They just wanted any Avenger. Didn't matter who. And any bridge team. So they don't need a specific person or team. I asked, confused. Why? Why not request the exact people they need, or explain what the problem is? There's a reason we have Creel and you along. May shook her head. Plow guard. We moved into position and she continued. Two very versatile Avengers. For most any situation we can face. With Coulson and the rest of us, the team that has dealt with maybe the most dangerous situations in the shortest amount of time of any bridge team. Should be interesting, I mumbled. Yeah, May's next swing practically split the air. I took a nap after the workout with May. When I woke up and checked, we were about an hour or so from Moscow. I decided to grab a bite to eat. When I left one of the little rooms set up in the bus for sleeping, I noticed Fitzsimmons sitting nearby. They were looking through a sheaf of papers. Hey guys, I said politely as I passed by to grab a sandwich from the bar. What are you up to? For some reason, they shared a nervous look. I wandered over to sit with them. Taking a big bite of the sandwich, I looked between the two. What did I miss? Nothing, both blurted out very quickly. I frowned. Well, color me convinced. Simmons sighed. I don't mean to be rude, Mahmoud, but this really is our business. Oh, yeah, that's fair. I took another bite of my sandwich. I'll head out then. Best of luck guys. Thank you, Fitz sighed. We'll need it. I got up and left to find someone else to bother. Leopold Fitz / scientist of Bridge. Simmons and Fitz waited until Mahmoud had left before opening the files in front of them. You don't think I was too mean, do you? Simmons said worriedly. What? He stared at her in confusion, then shook his head. No, you were right. This isn't his business. We need to deal with it ourselves. Simmons nodded, then looked down at the files. Okay, so they're going through background checks right now. That means we need to approach Coulson and let him know about our decision. That we're leaving, but we have people ready to help him. You don't think he'll say no to them, do you? Fitz asked. Why would he? Simmons asked. Because he might be mad at us. Fitz sighed. He leaned back in his chair, thinking carefully. This whole thing is just messing with my head. He rubbed his hands on his face with a groan. How do we tell Coulson? We have to be upfront, Fitz. Simmons raised her folder like she was carrying a certain star-spangled shield. Coulson has us for this mission. After that, the two looked at each other. After a long moment, they seemed to sag. Are we really doing this? Fitz asked. Leaving Coulson? And Sky? And May? After everything? Should we? Simmons didn't seem to have anything to say to that. Mahmoud / dial. Later, in Russia. How is it like TT this in April? I stuttered, rubbing my arms as we stepped off the plane into a world of ice and snow. All around us, soldiers and press had shown up. Usually, I'd have been really nervous to see all this stuff. Why you should have brought a jacket, Creel mumbled behind me. Coulson led the group down the steps, Sky behind him, the May, Fitz, Simmons, me, and Creel. So Fitz hasn't found a way to replicate the fusion cell you made, Simmons whispered to me. But it seems to be capable of creating vast amounts of clean energy. Not as much as an arc reactor, but enough that we can use it with the quantum batteries and dash. Simmons, hold in your scientist until after we meet the scary people. I hissed, trying to warm up while we walked past Lola, Coulson's sweet convertible. And when we get warm? Seriously, this isn't jacket-wearing weather, this is lava-swimming weather. I want hot cocoa. Right the hell now. Good afternoon. A smiling Russian man was waiting at the bottom of the cargo bay doors of the bus as we left the plane. He was short, overweight, and balding, with a very wide smile on his face. When he spoke, it was lightly accented, the way all ambassadors seemed to master with time. Agent Coulson? We were quite eager to meet you. I can tell, Coulson said wryly, holding a hand out to shake, which the Russian man took. Good to see you again, Boris. Boris? Sky asked as we joined the pair. Really? It was that or Yuri, Boris chuckled. Still, his eyes did flash with a hint of annoyance, and Coulson gave Sky a look that she returned with an apologetic one. My name is Boris Prokofiev, from the foreign consulate. And you, young lady? Sky. She shook his hand. I is my name, I mean. Sorry, I didn't mean to insult you or anything. Sometimes my mouth runs ahead of my brain. Boris looked startled, then smiled. Quite all right. We all started introducing ourselves until Boris got to Creel and I. Then he let out a little gasp. The Avengers? It is so nice to meet you, quite nice indeed. He shook my hand so hard I found myself wincing. Thanks. Nice to meet you as well. Same here. Creel asked, giving me a look like the hell is he so happy about. Oh, I really am so glad you are here. Boris turned to the crowd and hit what I now realized was a mic on his lapel. When he spoke again, it was in Russian, my Omnitrix translating. It was helped by the fact that now ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bridge and the Avengers, speakers rang out at the same time as his voice. What the hell? Sky whispered to Carlson as the crowd clapped half-heartedly. Propaganda, Carlson said with dawning realization. And look who is here to welcome them. Boris held up a hand. Instinct led me to step forward, twisting at the Omnitrix, May to my left and Creel to my right as the sound of an electricity crackling and the smell of ozone filled the air. Is Thor coming? Simmons asked. No, I said as we all stared at the sight of an absolutely massive white armored personnel carrier with a giant red star on the side showing up, the back opening as it stopped. It's not Thor. We all watched as they stepped out. A man in a red armored suit with a white star on it, carrying a grey triangular-shaped shield with a rounded top, the face of it displaying a two-headed griffin. I couldn't see his hair or eye color because he had a red mask covering his face much like Steve's, but what I could see of his jaw spoke of a certain strength. He was also built. Muscles on top of muscles. Just like Steve. Of course. He waved a hand proudly at the crowd as he exited, getting a cry of happiness from them. Next came a young woman wearing what had to be one of the skimpiest outfits I'd ever seen, basically a very brief purple swimsuit, apparently unbothered by the cold. Her hair was a deep black, almost blue, and she was incredibly beautiful. Because of course, she was. She had a very haughty look on her face, flipping her hair as she followed the red-suited man. The next person seemed as disgruntled with the cold as I was. Didn't stop me from whispering oh shit, when he hopped out. He had slicked back black hair, piercing black eyes, and was also built. Not like the guy in red though. This guy was lithe, built for speed, not strength. And of course, he wore a vest of lion skin that had been sewn and dyed to look like a lion's face, including the glowing yellow eyes, with the lion's mane left as a collar and the center split open so that his hairy chest was kept bare. He eyed us smugly as he hopped down from the APC. When he noticed me, his eyes flickered in a way that made me feel very uncomfortable, like I was a deer in front of a rifle. Then a loud boom filled the air as the next person stepped out. Almost as tall and wide as the Hulkbuster, it was deep crimson with touches of steel, made of dozens of metal plates interlocking together. Its helmet was simple, just a single line of clear material in a T-shape to see through over the eyes. Its shoulder plates were massive, same with its palms, and I could see small bursts of electricity arcing over its limbs, the cause of that ozone weed smelled, as it clanked over to join its allies. Darkness followed. I could talk about the golden armor he wore, with giant horns on the helmet and a skull over the chest that glowed red from the eyes and mouth with unholy light. But the darkness that wore the armor was my real focus. It looked like a darkly muscled giant as large as Hulk, but it felt like he was slowly sucking in the world around him, as though all light didn't exist in his presence. It felt hard to breathe near him, like my very life was pulled into the direction of that beast. I touched the Omnitrix and breathed deeply, closing my eyes. For some reason, after a moment of that, I felt better. When I opened my eyes again, Darkness Guy was smiling in my direction. So was Lion Skin Guy. I glared at them. Red Suit Guy glared at Creel, while Creel crossed his massive arms beside me. Behind the group of obvious superhumans, a big guy in a green Russian military uniform with blonde hair rushed out of the APC's driver's seat and ran over to join the group. Ladies and gentlemen, Boris said as the group walked over to stand across from us. Please greet Vanguard. The red-suited guy waved his arm and got an eruption of noise. Crimson Dynamo. The massive armored man let out a burst of electric noise. Phantasma. The young woman flipped her hair and released a burst of purple sparks with the motion. The hunter, Lion Skin, who I was now pretty sure had the last name of Kravinov, let out a cry that sounded half happy and half vicious roar. And Chernobog. The darkness raised his arms high. Against all odds, the affront to nature that pulled on my soul got a standing ovation. Your Winter Guard. What the hell is this? Creel mumbled behind me. Propaganda, Carlson said again. Straighten your chests, guys. We're fighting a very different battle. Chapter 105, Tension and Cooperation. March 11, 2014. Phil Carlson / leader of Team S.H.I.E.L.D. You shouldn't have done this, Boris, Carlson said fiercely, springing this on me, when my team and I are here to help. Carlson and the others had been escorted to the apparent headquarters for the Winter Guard, a location called the Tagansky Protected Command Point in the middle of Moscow. Carlson looked around the underground bunker they stood in. Boris' office was designed like a big square, with bookshelves behind his wooden desk and a large map of Asia on the wall behind his chair. When the hell did the Russian government set all this up? The Tagansky Protected Command Point was defunct. Carlson crossed his arms. We call it the Winter Guard Hall now, Boris said cheerily. Yeah, Winter Guard, Carlson eyed Boris. You've been at this for a while, Boris. You know how insane this all is it? Boris still had a cheery smile on his face, but his eyes had hardened. Why shouldn't we have our own heroes? Have people to help us without needing to call on the Avengers? Carlson shook a head. I don't care about that personally. What I care about is calling us over here as some pedantic way to show up the Avengers and bridge and make your team look good. Is that what happened? Boris asked, doing his best to sound confused. You had press waiting as we landed. My team shivering in the cold, there to do a job instead of wasting time trying to look good, and your team arriving in full armor and gear. Image is everything, Boris. We really do try to show up in our best attire, Boris chuckled. His smile faded after a moment. Carlson, I was told to do that for my country. That I wouldn't be allowed to ask for help unless I made it look like we didn't need it. To make our first superhero team look good. For my country, he sighed. I didn't even have time to introduce Vanguard's sister, she's still in training. We saw an opportunity to be the first country in the world to have a team of superheroes. One independent of the Avengers or Bridge. Why are we here, Boris? Carlson said slowly. To make your sponsored supers look good. No, Boris rose to his feet. Despite the introduction, my hope is that your team and mine can work together to solve a problem. He walked around the desk, picking up a folder. The day before my government approached your director, a military base was attacked. As of now, our team is young, untested, and we do not want to take any chances. Carlson stared at the folder with his arms when Boris held it out, making sure to take his time. Boris continued to hold the folder out. Finally, Carlson reached out and took the folder, opening it as Boris sat back against his desk. What are your team's capabilities? Carlson asked while reading the papers. I'll need to know that if you want us to cooperate. For that, I recommend reading our files and speaking with Mikhail. Boris nodded behind him. Carlson turned to look at the man who entered. The APC driver that had brought in the Winter Guard was as tall as Creel, with a blonde flat-top haircut and Russian uniform. He nodded politely when Carlson met his eyes, face neutral. Major Mikhail Uryokovich is the one in charge of organizing the team, and is the one who speaks with them most often, Boris explained as Mikhail strode in. Good afternoon, Mikhail said, his accent far thicker than Boris. He held his hand out to shake, which Phil took. Good to meet you, Carlson said with a sigh before turning to Boris. I need to speak to my superiors first. Please do, Boris said. But remember, Russia's press is very efficient. They likely already know. Carlson smiled just a bit. Boris smiled as well. Both smiles showed just a bit of falseness. I already know about it, Maria said over the phone to Carlson as he paced the length of the hallway he'd ended up in. Give me news I don't have. Gladly, Carlson replied. This team has been in the works for years. Super soldier experiments, studies into exotic energies, the works from what I can find in these files. The only people who've done more so far is Hydra. I feel like there's a but coming, Maria noted. But, Carlson said with another turn on the carpet to pace back. This is clearly a sanitized version of the truth. So I'm taking the files with a grain of salt. Till then, here's what I know about the Winter Guard. Carlson opened up the folder in his hands. In some ways, we're actually the cause for this, unintentionally. How so? Maria asked. When the Hercules program kicked off and started revealing Hydra operatives across the world, Russia was one of the ones who got the message. They went after Hydra with a vengeance, killed dozens of operatives and raided almost as many bases. A few of them research facilities, others were similar to the graveyard. Maria didn't speak for a moment. That is just horrifying. You should see the pictures, Carlson said without a hint of humor. But along with all that was research files. Lots of failures, but some promising avenues were opened up thanks to that. They burned what was useless, killed anyone unwilling to work for them, and started working on making their own heroes. And from the looks of it, they succeeded. Got enough from a combination of stolen research and good old ingenuity and hard work to make their own heroes. And what did they get? Maria asked. One by one, we've got Vanguard, real name Nikolai Krylenko. Carlson opened to an image of Vanguard. The large red-suited man was front-flipping through the air, shield in mid-flight. Former military, since birth. His dad was a nuclear physicist, and his twin sister, Lania, is a prospect to one day join Winter Guard. He's got a good military record, lots of medals to strap on his uniform. They're Captain America. Like Deathlock, he's been enhanced with a combination of cybernetics and serums. They claim he's even more powerful. I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. Don't, Maria said through the phone. While I agree he might be weaker, we can't make assumptions. Carlson hesitated, then sighed, and flipped to the next photo. Okay, now we have Sergei Kravinov. I know that name, Maria sounded surprised. Kraven the Hunter, guy made a name for himself in Africa. Carlson picked up an image of the man wrestling a hippo. Wrestling. A hippo. The most dangerous animal in Africa, and he had a smile on his face as he wrapped his arms around the giant gray animal's neck. We had some records of him, but nothing too intensive. Rumor goes he's a hunter who prides himself on killing through stealth and his bare hands. Maybe less of a rumor, now, Maria said. I'm guessing you're pulling up the files as I go. Do you even need to ask? Carlson smirked. No. Anyways, the next one is Crimson Dynamo. Technology they claim is based on Vanko's old research. As in Ivan Vanko, the guy who attacked Stark years back. as well as Anton's and some old Tesla designs apparently. Carlson held up a photo of the giant armored suit lifting a tank. They don't say who the pilot is, but this thing looks like it has some impressive guns. Maybe even big enough to give Tony a run for his money. Can't help but notice you're less defensive when it comes to Stark, Maria said wryly. Carlson chuckled. Well, this is where it gets really weird. Phantasma, aka, nothing. Her real name is Phantasma. Like Cher, I guess. Carlson shook his head. Claims she's a magic user. You must be kidding, Maria sighed. Nope. They say she learned it by instinct, and got some lessons afterward from some place they redacted. Carlson switched his phone to speaker, placing it on the ground. He was tired of holding it to his ear. Okay, she's sort of their Wanda, basically. It's not a perfect comparison, obviously, but she can manipulate minds, block attacks with shields, and even fly. So she's weird, Maria simplified. And the last one, Chernobog, the Slavic god of darkness. Maria asked, surprised. Maybe? Weird thing is, there is almost too much info on this guy, if he even is a guy. He showed up at the same time as the Rio incident. Russia did have some people on the ground dash. No, he showed up in Russia, Carlson interrupted. Just, poof. In the middle of a village in the home of some guy. Then he started absorbing energy from all around him. Focused on the sick and dying. When the Russian government found out, they saw the chance to get a god on their side. He's superhumanly strong dash. Feels like everyone is, Maria grumbled. Fair. He's also got the power to absorb energy. Sort of reminds me of Marcus Daniels. Not a great memory. He's terrifying. Carlson laid out the photos on the floor and started taking pictures, sending them to Maria. The last one is Chernobog. Holy. The image was the black-skinned monster in the midst of devouring a deer. Blood dripped down black jaws and teeth, the monster leering at the camera. Yeah, apparently they really want to lean into the god of darkness thing, Carlson mumbled. We'll have to deal with that. Maybe ask Thor if he's lost another enemy, Maria said at last. So the question follows. With all these people, why are you there? Why have us send you? Insist on having Avengers along. For propaganda. I don't think so, Carlson said, raising one last picture, unable to hold back his disgust. Mahmoud /dial. Creel and I stood side by side in what looked like a lounge. At the least it had a pool table in the center. Across from us were the Winter Guard. And they were close enough that I could actually recognize the celebrities they looked like. Kind of annoying, as powers go. I can tell the important people if they're played by celebrities I recognize, but only if I actually recognized them. Should have spent more time on IMDb. I looked them over, taking in as much as I could. In a rough and modulated voice, Crimson Dynamo spoke. He sounded like an evil Terminator. Yeah, an evil Terminator. He spoke in Russian, so that Creel and I couldn't understand. Which meant my decision to keep the Omnitrix's universal translator out of public knowledge had worked out. They are staring at us, Crimson Dynamo growled. He was at the back of the room, standing unnaturally still while lightning arced across his metal arms. Let them, Phantasma said in Russian as well. She crossed her legs and eyed me back. She looked like Kalinka Fox, a Russian cosplayer in my world. She was short, with long black hair, bright blue eyes, and a confident smirk. These are Avengers? They're big, aren't they? The shapeshifter, the hunter said. Craven. Very clearly Craven. As played by Manu Bennett, the actor I knew for his role as Deathstroke. Weird. Dude was still eyeing me like my ribs would make a good sheath. He's listening. Watching. And the bald one is ready for a fight. Alloy and Dial, Vanguard growled. Both are shifters. Delicious. Everyone in the room except the darkness winced as a smooth voice drifted into our ears. Like a knife gently slicing through meat. Can you taste it? Their souls are mutated. Exotic flavors are such a treat. And the pain on the bald one's soul, that taste of desperate hope is dash. Chernobog, none of us can understand you, Phantasma said with a wince. Talk normally you oaf. A huffing noise beat in sync with my heart. My heartbeat seemed to slow and speed up to match it. Took a second to realize he was laughing. Apologies. I'm simply excited, Chernobog chuckled. I didn't like what that horrific knife on my earlobes made me feel, and Creel growled. Can I eat them? Try it, I snarled. That got the whole group to stop and stare at me. You speak Russian? Phantasma said, sounding surprised. I cheat, I replied easily. Any chance you guys want to talk to us, or just keep musing? Chernobog laughed again. Dude, stop, seriously, I grumbled. You damn, living edgelord emo deity. He stopped, grinning with black triangular teeth. Oh, that is interesting. Haven't been called that before. Is it a compliment? Creel cracked his neck, drawing the attention of the room. Okay, in case it wasn't clear, I don't speak Russian. But if that thing talks again, I'm ripping its arms off. The tension in the room racketed upward. Vanguard's hand tightened on his shield strap. Speak again, Yobani Urod, and I will break your limbs. Vanguard, Crimson Dynamo's robotic voice intoned as he rose up. Vanguard looked back him. Crimson Dynamo shook his head. We have orders. Duh, Vanguard grumbled. The tension slowly faded and I waved my hands playfully. Yay, we're all friends now. Phantasma surprised me by laughing. She covered her mouth quickly, but we'd all caught it. I grinned up at Creel, who smirked. Okay, let's start over, I said, having expertly broken the ice. I gathered myself and breathed deeply. Steve would have tried to work with these guys. He wasn't here, so I had to be his poor replacement. I'm Dial, of the Avengers, this is Alloy, same. We're superheroes. And you are E. I waved a hand to try and beckon them. You already know who we are, Sergey said, finally showing an emotion other than hunt and eat. Right, yeah, I chuckled. Look, clearly, you all have some sort of issue with us. But we came because someone asked us to work with Russian authorities. So how about, we try and do that? The door to the room opened, Carlson and Boris walking in followed by, well, holy shit. Sentiments I agree with, Carlson said with a look around. Dial, Creel, this is Mikhail. Mikhail looked like Dolph Lundgren. Young Dolph Lundgren, playing Ivan Drago. Up until he gave us a wide and happy smile. Good afternoon, gentlemen, he said in thickly accented English. Sup, I said hesitantly. Most welcome to meet you both. Mikhail added. He's the superhuman liaison officer for Russia's government, Carlson explained. I thought it best you both speak with him when it comes to preparing for this mission. What is the mission? Creel asked, sounding agitated. Carlson held up a finger and waited for a moment. Soon, Sky, Simmons, Fitz, and May strode in, moving to stand alongside us. I noted Sky's backpack. Good, you're all here. Boris, do you mind if I lay all our cards on the table? No, please, Boris waved politely for Carlson to speak. Thank you, Carlson passed folders to us. 2 days ago, March 9th, a military base filled with Russian soldiers stopped checking in. When their people were sent out to investigate, they found a base of dead men and women and a few others. Others? Creel asked, opening his folder. Something that had no gender, Carlson clarified. Well, kinda clarified. Ah, that's no fun, Sky mumbled. Then she winced at the photos inside. Oh, that is just dash. Fascinating. Simmons chirped while looked more closely at the picture. Fascinating, really? Fitz asked her, horrified. Well, it depends on your perspective, Simmons mumbled. They look like, I raised the picture in my hand and pursed my lips thoughtfully. Servitors. From Warhammer 40k. I said the same, Crimson Dynamo said, surprising the hell out of me. I gave the armored suit a look, then looked back down at the picture. It was a mangled body with no clothes on. And they had cybernetic limbs that looked fused to their flesh. Rough-looking bits of iron and steel, covered in wires and gears. The thing's head was half metal, with insanely nasty-looking sections that looked infected where the metal sank into flesh. I'm going to be sick, Fitz coughed, putting his folder down. Not a pretty sight. Yes, Boris agreed. Do you have one of these bodies? Simmons asked. Bless her soul, always a scientist. Yes. And here's the kicker, Carlson pointed a section of the file out to her. Once the DNA came in, we found out they weren't human. They're monkeys. Fitz said excitedly. What is it with you and monkeys? Sky asked. Fitz looked around at all of us and rubbed the back of his neck. I just like monkeys. Okay, I turned to everyone. So some guy took robot parts and smashed them together with monkeys? Shaved monkeys? And these things took out a whole base. Slaughtered, Vanguard growled. Slaughtered a base of our soldiers. These were not your American weekend warriors. These were men trained to kill. And still, they lost. And we know who was responsible. Boris stepped aside as some guy in a suit rolled in a big screen TV on a cart. The day after the attack, we received a VHS tape. VHS, really? Sky cocked her head in confusion. I know. So primitive, Boris said sadly. It is in Russian, but the translation is in your files. He pressed a button on the TV and it came alive. Another button started playing the video, and that was when a James Bond villain appeared on the screen. I wasn't super familiar with James Bond, but I did remember the guy on the TV looked like a general from the movie that had a really dumb name. Octo something. A Russian general, of course. This guy looked different in a couple of ways, like the long strands of white hair falling about his shoulders despite the baldness on the top of his head, and the thick red coat he wore. He had a very pinched face and a grim expression. He began to speak in Russian. My name is Ivan Kragov. I was a scientist for the Soviet Union, in an era when my country was strong and united. He clenched a leather-gloved fist. And now, we have been weakened. Forced to live in a world where capitalism has replaced our pure strength. Ivan eyed the camera as though it had offended him. No more. I am offering the people of Russia to rise above. To show the world who we are. He rose from his chair, eyes hard. I believe in my people. But I must supply them weapons, to allow them to survive the monstrosities of the modern world. As such, I had to sacrifice. To prove that my weapons were worthy. And so I have. This crazy bastard actually had the gall to look proud. When you are ready, I will send you my weapons, and allow you to use them for the war. The war that will end all wars at last, to leave a world of Russian greatness, he scowled. But, if you choose to refuse, then I will do what I must. I will force the issue. Force my beloved nation to accept their greatness. A raised and shaking fist rose up, the man actually having the gall to shed some tears. I am Ivan Kragov. And what I do for my country. The video shut off. Monster, Vanguard hissed. You said it, Carlson mumbled. Okay, I looked down at the folder in my hand. Filled with images of the dead. Men and women, dressed in military uniform. There was a man with, did you know that when the human body gets hit with enough all at once, the liquids in your body flash boil and explode outward? Yeah, Another one, a woman, had her chest cavity opened up by something ripping it apart with pure force. All right, Carlson crossed his arms and swayed slightly as he spoke. We'll fight over the politics later. Right now, we need to get to work. First, Boris, you have information on Krakow? What do we need to do? I asked Carlson and Boris. The two shared a look. Boris sighed. I told you, Carlson. Our nation needs Bridge and the Avengers. We have attempted to find this madman on our own, but we must not waste time. I have sacrificed my reputation and did that PR stunt. In return for the request, Vanguard and Phantasma didn't look pleased. And now, those idiots will not allow me to request more support, as they wish to resolve this with as little aid as possible. I will follow your lead, as long as you respect my country. You are a good man. So I know you will. Carlson had a very neutral look on his face. Finally, he looked over everyone in the room. Avengers, Winter Guard, Creel, and I, all 2 Avengers in the room, straightened along with the others. You'll stay here with Mikhail and May, try to figure out how to work together in combat. These things took out a base. I want to make sure we know the others' capabilities before we head out. He looked at Crimson Dynamo. Except you. I imagine you've got some skill in engineering. I am the one who built and maintains my suit, Crimson Dynamo confirmed in that weird robotic way of his. Perfect. I'd like to ask you to help the other team. Carlson nodded to each one as he spoke. Sky, Fitz, Simmons. These things are flesh and machine. I'm going to need you to find out how they were made, where they came from, the works. Yeah, sure, I'll hack a corpse, monkey, robot. Sky frowned. Servitors, I said, lifting a picture. They look like them, except for way nastier. Worrying concept, Crimson Dynamo said. Boris and I will speak to the government and see what we can pour on this. I'd like to get more bridge resources on this, maybe some Russian military support. The rest of you have your assignments. Carlson looked around at us. Go. Everyone else left, leaving Winter Guard, Mikhail the world best Ivan Drago impersonator, and May. Creel and I shared a look. This should be fun, he said with absolutely no enthusiasm. Maybe. I grabbed a chair nearby and shoved it closer to the Winter Guard, sitting down as casually as I could. So, how do we do this? May and Mikhail shared a look. Finally, everyone started grabbing chairs. Except for Chernobog, who just watched everyone with those unsettling eyes. Let us start simply. Mikhail looked between Creel and I. My English not good, do you mind if I speak Russian? May and I nodded. Creel was about to say something before I spoke up. I'll translate for you. Creel sighed in relief, then nodded. Mikhail looked just as relieved. Thank you. So, I already know of some of your capabilities. The heroes Dial and Alloy are well known to us. And the cavalry is a respected combatant. Creel and I looked at May when Mikhail said that. She scowled. Don't call me that. Mikhail blinked. Oh, my apologies if I offended. Don't worry about it. May cut him off, clearly still annoyed. So you know about us. And we have files on you. She lifted one of the folders we'd been given. How best can we work together in a combat scenario? Well, clearly Dial will be good for any role. Mikhail waved at me. While Alloy would be best on the front lines of any conflict. I must ask, do any of you have any conflicts in working with us? I would have wished for my people meeting and working with the Avengers to have a less rough introduction. Nah, I rested my head on my cheek. It's not a great first impression, but a very smart lady recently warned me about making assumptions. May smirked. I'm not here for politics, Creel added. Just tell us who to punch. Mikhail didn't seem to know how to take that. He coughed, then continued to speak. Very well. Then this is what I suggest. Vanguard is our most skilled field tactician, so I'd like him to take the lead. Now, when it comes to power, Chernobog is our most powerful member in close quarters. Dr. Leopold Fitz. This is so exciting, Simmons said happily as Crimson Dynamo led them through the halls. More superheroes, a mission in Russia. And monkeys, Fitz reminded her. Can't forget that. I think the superheroes are the best part, Sky noted. I mean seriously, is every superhero just built as the ultimate fantasy? Did you see the muscles on Vanguard? Fitz gulped. He hadn't. He'd been more distracted by Phantasma. She'd been dressed so skimpily. How did she do that in Russia, with the cold? But that giant monster, the one called Chernobog, Sky shuddered. What is that thing? A dark god, Crimson Dynamo said. In the old legends, he is, how you say, the opposite of all that is good in this world. He absorbs the energy of all things, but life is his preferred food. Fitz gulped. Well, that was terrifying. Seriously, he was on their superhero team? Granted, the Avengers had Hulk, but Hulk was so friendly. They'd had a food fight and everything? In comparison. Here we are. Crimson Dynamo stepped under a doorway and slowly stepped in, careful not to damage the door. Fitz followed inside and immediately held his nose. Oh good God. 4 corpses rested on tables. One was human, a poor man who had been ripped and burned to shreds. The other 3 were those monkey robots that were the cause of all the hullabaloo. And God help him, he really hated the smell of infection. God, this is so amazing, Simmons whispered, making a beeline toward the cyborgs. And so, disgusting? Sky asked, holding her nose as well. Well, yes, Simmons admitted. But it's also a rush job. I thought the same, Crimson Dynamo said. If you excuse me, I will be back momentarily. Yeah, sure, Sky said. The giant armored figure stepped out of the room with some loud clanking noises. Man, that is one crazy giant piece of armor. Fitz finally stepped up the servitors, as Dial had called them, and held his nose. Then he took a closer look, trying to block out the smell. These look like cybertech enhancements? But not really. There's modifications, genius ones. If there was more time put into them, they could have been integrated properly. These look almost like power cells. Here. Not powerful, but enough for weapons and limb movement. Here, Crimson Dynamo walked back and held out a gas mask, the kind all labs that might have if dealing with dangerous chemicals and diseases would have. I have armor, but you might need this, duh. Oh, thank you, Fitz said, surprised but pleased. He quickly put it on and smiled at the taller figure. How do I look? He asked, voice muffled. Less grossed out, Sky joked. Anyway, guess I got to start the work too. Moon prism power, make up. Fitz watched as the backpack Sky had put on snapped open. She held out her arms with a smile. Pieces started moving outward, rolling to cover her chest, back, legs, and arms, until a helmet snapped over her head. She stood there covered in her dark blue armor. The armor design had been changed on her request. Now, instead of another hard-shell Iron Man suit, it looked like it was made up of segmented plates over an undersuit, with larger plates over vital areas, giving the user maximum mobility. The undersuit beneath looked like striations of dark muscle. Fitz could see her partially blurred face through the flat triangular piece of blue polymer that was her view screen. She lifted her arm and a holographic screen floated over her wrist. That is interesting, Crimson Dynamo sounded surprised. I have yet to crack the trick for doing that, as carborundum alloy is far too dense for such a transformation, despite the increased durability and electrical absorption properties. Electrical absorption. Fitz turned to look at her. That sounds fascinating. Did you make that alloy yourself? Fitz, he turned to look at Simmons, who had also put on a gas mask and was in the midst of slicing into a servitor's chest. Focus. Oh, right. He felt some embarrassment. Well, the engineering is clearly upgraded from cybertech. It is sloppy, however. Crimson Dynamo sounded almost offended. The Svolok who made them was more worried about speed. Look, here, he pointed at where screws had been dug deep into flesh and steel. The way the metal was ground down, the cuts where the debil seemed to lose patience and just slammed everything together. And the organic parts are strange. Simmons frowned. Look here, this doesn't look right. Almost as though this was pieced together. These power cells are the same way. Fitz leaned down and shook his head. They're almost like weaker versions of Chidori energy cells. There was a lot of efficiency sacrificed here. But, these limbs are still very powerful. And this seems to be an energy weapon. Well, I'm going to see if there's something I can hack here. Sky circled the bodies with her arm held high, typing at her screen. Crimson Dynamo seemed amazed at the sight. There's got to be something. Okay, hold on. This looks dash. Suddenly all three bodies shook. Everyone froze. Not for long. Crimson Dynamo lifted his arms, lightning cracking to focus on the palms of his armored hands. Are you dash? The bodies erupted off the tables. Fitz shrieked, diving aside while Simmons screamed and stepped back. One body, the one whose body Simmons had been cutting into, rushed Crimson Dynamo with unsettling quietness, reaching out with a long steel arm tipped with long metallic fingers ending in blades. The blade slammed into Crimson Dynamo's chest and bounced off. With that shout, Crimson Dynamo unleashed a blast. Pure lightning flew out from his arms and slammed into the creature, sending it flying back into a wall. A second creature landed on Crimson Dynamo and started clawing at him, the armored warrior snarling out more Russian as he made to grab the thing. Fitz yelled again when the last of the three corpses jumped at him. He ducked, the monster flying over him to end up scratching at the wall instead. The creature spun and raised an arm that ended in a tube that glowed purple at the end. Oh, bloody hell. Fitz leaped out of the way again, and a purple ball flew at where he'd been, melting the steel table he'd ducked near into molten slag. The logical part of Fitz's mind noted it was a plasma bolt, and immediately worked on figuring out how it managed to be so precise, figuring out how the circuitry and coming up with improvements. The rest of him went to his mouth and screamed out the least logical thing it could. Why monkey, why? The creature ignored his screaming to aim at Fitz again. Its arm glowed. Sky kicked its arm upward, sending the bolt flying into the ceiling and exploding to send stone raining down on them. The creature staggered back, then lifted both hands, swinging its arms at her. Sky blocked a punch and was sent skidding back several feet from the force of it. At the same time, the first corpse Crimson Dynamo had shot at leaped up and tried to land on Crimson Dynamo. The giant armored man caught the creature out of the air and ripped the one still clawing at him off of his back. Sky fired the plasma casters in her suit's gauntlets, two basketball-sized green balls flying forward, burning into her opponent's chest and setting the creature's flesh alight. Without a sound, it tried to rise up once more. Seriously, Sky shouted, shooting it again and sending it flying back where it shuddered on the floor. Crimson Dynamo, at the same time, hugged the two creatures close. The sound of something charging filled the air. Falu Ubani Uridi, two metal arms crushed the creature's clothes with bone-breaking force, and lightning suddenly erupted all around the armored man. It crackled loudly in a focused bubble, blinding Fitz. He slid back slowly in amazement, looking over at where Sky had killed one of the creatures, then back at the bubble of focused lightning. The lightning stopped moments later. Crimson Dynamo lifted and slammed the creatures onto the ground, growling. Fitz stared at the corpses. They were fried and charred, backs shattered by the immense strength of the armored man. Crimson Dynamo rose tall and looked over at Sky. Are you okay? Yeah, Sky winced and waved the arm she'd blocked the punch from the creature with. Damn, those things hit hard. There must have been some sort of subsystem inside it. Fitz shook his head. Something that reacted when we tried to hack it. Well, that wasn't enough, Sky said determinedly, walking up to the one she'd killed whose torso was a charred rack. I'm hacking what's left in this thing's head, and I'm damn well not letting some zombie monkey keep me from finding that asshole. Fitz struggled to his feet. Why yeah, I'll just dash. A man in a lab coat rushed into the room, shouting in surprise at the sight of 3 bodies turned to near ash, a table melted, and a hole in the ceiling. More people came in, shouting in Russian. I'll speak with them, Dynamo said. Then we will find out where these came from. Fitz nodded, staring at the charred bodies thoughtfully. Phil Cowlson/leader of Team S.H.I.E.L.D. Cowlson watched a frustrated Boris slam his phone down on his desk with a shout of, "Oh wow," Phil said in honest surprise. I didn't expect the language. Boris looked surprised, then chuckled. Yes, well, Dynamo is a bad influence on me. I know the feeling. Cowlson shook his head. So, no chance they're letting us call in more support. Not without proof that the forces we already have cannot handle it, Boris said sadly. I am glad you brought your team and the Avengers. But I had to promise to do that little propaganda stunt to put that request through. Well, our people should be enough. Cowlson walked up to the desk. I'm not going to lie, knowing we'd have more superhumans on call is smart. But my team is made up of the best. As is mine, Boris chuckled. But I can't help but worry. Thank you for putting politics aside to help us, Cowlson. Do you remember Camilla Reyes? Cowlson said. The Peruvian woman. Boris smirked. I remember you took quite a shine to her, from what I heard. I did. Cowlson was less amused. I met her again, recently. Took a bit less of a shine to her this time. But, during our little scrap, I told her something I stick by, that the borders and colors we use to divide up the earth matter a lot less when the world is threatened. This guy, Ivan. He's a good example that we need to fight together, not against each other. Boris hesitated. Cowlson dash. He was interrupted by an alarm that began to ring out across the base. Boris and Cowlson shared a look before the phone rang. Boris picked it up. Yes, what is happening? Shut down the alarm then. If Dynamo says they handled it, then they handled it. Go ahead and get them everything they need. Boris waited a moment, then hung up the phone. They have something? Cowlson asked. Yes and no. Boris narrowed his eyes. Things have gotten very strange, Cowlson. Boris, you really have no idea. Author's note, I never know how chapters like this will be responded to. All I can say is that I did my best to show the Winter Guard as having problems with some things, but generally just being people doing their best for their country. Not perfect. But they aren't inhuman machines of the Russian government. And yet, the Russian government really did have a problem. But when Boris wanted to get extra help just in case, a group of prideful morons in the government blocked him. The propaganda thing was the trade-off. To make sure when help arrived, Russia stood in a position of strength. In final, the bad guys are robot monkeys that take at least 3 shots of plasma and a small lightning storm to kill. Oh, and some guy named Ivan Kragov. Probably not too dangerous, wouldn't worry about them, pay no attention to the man behind the mirror. Chapter 106, Phantasma. March 11, 2014. We got interrupted briefly by Sky and Crimson Dynamo going all for the Emperor, on the monkey zombie servitors, but after that Mikhail, Vanguard, and May got into full swing talking about team formations, which left the rest of us to kind of drift off. I'm not a general. I'm a fighter, nowadays, and that has been a journey and a half. So, out of curiosity, I started wandering around on my own, with a pair of armed Russian guards, of course. I didn't mind. They weren't going to just trust a random American with their base after all. After all, I could do a lot of damage inside, well, inside anywhere. The Russian base of the Winter Guard was freaking badass. Taginsky Protected Command Point had apparently once been a secret military base at the height of the Cold War. It was completely underground in the middle of Moscow, right next to the metro lines. Of course, it wasn't a secret nowadays, since a Google search had told me all that, but real estate is real estate. And honestly, it was a sweet base. I ended up stopping near the bottom of the base when one of the guards stepped in front of a door, preventing me from walking in. Classified, he said in heavily accented English. Oh, I hesitated. Man, classified is such a tempting word. Maybe there was something cool behind the door. Or something illegal. Or both. Maybe it was where Dynamo kept some of his suits. It's where we hold the generator, someone said, cutting off my train of crazy ideas with the harsh blade of reality. We all turned to see Phantasma walking up to us. The scantily clad woman walked over in her high heels. Seriously, she looked just like Kalinka Fox, which was blowing my mind. I'd get over it, same as I had with Steve and Nat looking like Chris and Scarjo. She stopped in front of me and smiled. I was surprised to realize she was a head shorter than me. Didn't seem the least intimidated by the height difference though. You want to see? It's quite interesting. Ma'am, the guard who had stopped me from entering protested. Phantasma rolled her eyes and switched to Russian. Get out of the way. I will guard him. The pair of guards shared a look. After a moment, they walked away, still looking dissatisfied. One said, a slur the Omnitrix translated as something similar to freak. Someone born unnaturally. I stared after them in shock, then looked at Phantasma. She bit her bottom lip, pain in her eyes. When she saw me looking, she quickly recovered, turning and entering the room I'd been barred from. The room we entered was big, almost house-sized. In the center was something that brought me to a standstill. Damn. That is impressive. A gigantic machine was humming in the center of the room. It looked like a giant and squat letter H, with that little line in the middle replaced by a big glowing metal ball with wires and some pokey sections coming off of it. I walked down some steps to join Phantasma, who smiled up at me. She was standing near a set of comfy chairs that had been set up around a beat-up wooden coffee table. Dynamo made it. It's based on the same technology as his armor, as well as some notes from Tesla. I'm not sure how it works, but it's quite beautiful, isn't it? Hell yeah, I said in awe, watching the glowing blue orb. I grunted, walking down the last of the steps to join her. She sat down on a chair and put one leg over the other, watching me while I did the same. So, does that happen often? I asked her. The guys you work with, calling you a freak. Phantasma let out a surprised huff. You're rather blunt, aren't you? It's part of my charm. She shook her head. It's annoying? So is you avoiding the question. Sometimes, Phantasma admitted. She looked over at the reactor as it continued to hum. We are gifted with incredible abilities. She lifted a hand and twisted it. Purple lights flowed off her fingertips, turning into intricate sigils set in a violet circle. A Google search later told me it was something similar to mandalas in Eastern cultures, but with Russian lettering and symbols. The light shone against her face as she watched it thoughtfully. But they separate us from the rest of humanity. It is only logical for them to covet our abilities. To be jealous. I rested my head against my hand. Sure. Sometimes. But it sucks too, right? Getting called that by people who are supposed to be your allies. It is the nature of people. She raised a hand and watched the purple sigils float away from her. To fear and covet these abilities. Yeah, it's human nature. And it sucks. Phantasma clenched a fist, destroying the sigils. Yes, it sucks. She looked over at me. How long have you had your abilities, Mr. Sheikht? I leaned my head back to look at the ceiling, thinking. I don't know, 6, 7 months? Since October, maybe. She laughed. You don't remember. It's been a bit of a roller coaster. I grinned. The last few months sort of flew by. Phantasma nodded slowly. I have had my powers all my life. Since I was a little girl in an orphanage. I was forced to hide them. We Russians aren't very friendly to that, which is different. Later, when the Russian government took me in for training after Bridge was created, I was happy. Happy to prove my abilities were a gift for the people, to save and help my country. They didn't mistreat you. I couldn't help but ask. If they had, Mikhail would have beaten them to a pulp. She smiled fondly. The image of Ivan Drago glaring down at me saying I must break you filled my mind. Yeah, can't imagine anyone messing with her with that in her side, putting aside her own abilities. He has been a father to me. Kept me safe, taught me to love these gifts. We sat quietly for a moment, listening to that massive engine hum in the center of the room. I can't pretend to know what you went through. I mean, I didn't have these powers for long. But I know what it's like to find a home. A place where people have your back. Phantasma leaned forward in her seat. But if you had to leave them? To help them elsewhere? Would you? I stared at her, unthinking. How long are we talking? Unspecified, Phantasma said. Oh, so this is a heavy type question. I rubbed the back of my neck. I'd hate it. It would suck. For multiple reasons. But if it's for I hesitated on the word to use. For my team? Yeah. I mean, I'm here, right? Phantasma bit her lip thoughtfully. And if they were the only family you had? The only ones who had ever trusted you, to have treated you as more than a freak or a weapon? For some reason, I could tell that answering too quickly would be to my detriment. That it would seem like I was treating this very important question with careless brevity. I looked back at the glowing orb in silence, thinking. When I spoke, it was only after some thinking. You know, I think, as long as it's to keep them and the world safe, I'd head out. For their sake. Being a superhero sucks sometimes. There, you have more experience than I do, Phantasma joked. But thank you. It helps, a little, to talk about this. No problem. Funny though, I kinda thought you were hanging out with me to get secrets or something James Bond type, I said with a chuckle. She smirked. No, I'm not exactly the spying type. Do I look like a woman from a James Bond film? When I cocked an eyebrow, she looked down at her purple outfit and rolled her eyes. Fair enough. Don't you get cold? I asked. No, my powers protect me. Let me express myself as I wish, she wiggled in her seat. I spent a lifetime hiding myself and my powers, pretending I wasn't different. This is just me standing out at last. I nodded. Yeah, I know someone like that, I said, thinking of Jen. Suddenly, it became hard to breath. I looked up at the door at the same time as Phantasma. Oh, a living shadow strode into the room, teeth of black smiling down at us. You look cozy. I'm disappointed. I was hoping he was planning on fighting you. I'm not the combative type. I glared up at the guy as he walked down the stairs. But you are. Chernobog huffed out a laugh and I felt my heart clench and release with each puff of laughter. I can smell it on you. Blood and pain, like wine dripping off a knife. It's almost hilarious. Chernobog, did you need something? Phantasma said in annoyance. I just came to annoy you. Well, what the hell was I supposed to say to that? It's fun, you know, seeing how people react in my presence. Used to be so boring. All the knights in shiny armor, screaming about they'd destroy the evil god and remove all darkness. It was fun, at first. Killing them off had its own fun appeal to it. But then, they were boring, he scoffed. Idiots. As though I was the reason they all killed and raped across the land. He sat down at a chair with us with a loud sigh of pleasure. It made for a ridiculous image. I like this century better. You all have more fun reactions, so much more varied. And Netflix? What a concept. He laughed while I looked at Phantasma, who was slowly moving her fingers around to make more magic purple sparks. I always rewatch The Office. Can't help it. It's just intoxicating. Are you always this ridiculous, or are you still looking for a reaction? I asked. Can't I do both? He smiled at me. Seriously, that doesn't. Everything about him made me feel as though I was dying. Like he was seconds from ripping my throat out. Every word made my heart clench, and the second he walked in I had to squint to see, like all light that had been illuminating the room was headed toward him instead. See? Interesting, the darkness in gold armor purred. I'm curious, Dial. That watch of yours. Can it defeat me? You wanna give it a shot? I growled. He laughed. No. See, the reason I'm curious is, well, the Russians, as they call themselves now, they made us to reflect you Avengers. I'm sure you've noticed. Sorta obvious. You got a point there, bud. Oh yes. Well, Vanguard and Dynamo are obvious. Hunter, he's just a killer, like your Black Widow and Hawkeye. I'm the one who is supposed to represent your Hulk and that pondering oaf Thor. He looked over at Phantasma. But who is Phantasma? In our little group. Chernobog, she said warningly, more purple sparks flowing. If you say another word. You know, she was eager to meet you, he hissed softly. They warned her to be ready. She needed to be versatile, to have a counter for every trick, every alien. Sonic spells, illusions, shields, poisons. How often did you train, Phantasma? For the day you might need to kill your new friend. Enough. With that shout, she swung a hand at him. A purple line of energy blasted him in the face with enough force that I was rocked back in my chair. He sat for a moment, he snapped to the side from the impact of her blow. He slowly turned to look at her. Chernobog smiled. Oh, does it shame you? To sit across from a man you thought you might have to kill, while he's being so friendly. You've got issues, I said softly. Dozens, he chuckled. But then, that is my life. Phantasma spun and walked out. I gave Chernobog a glare, then went to follow her as he laughed eerily. After some walking, she stopped and looked at me. I had to, I asked. Honestly, I'd expected an apology. Instead, she was eyeing me fiercely. We all did, she spat out. All of us had to be ready in case the Avengers would invade Russia. A worst-case scenario. And I don't regret it. It was necessary. A bit of a hurtful statement, considering I'm right here, you know. I pointed out. You scare people. She crossed her arms looking up at me. That is unavoidable. I don't want to kill anyone dash. Okay, that's more on the right track, back to friendly ground, I said. But I also needed to be ready to kill you despite that. And you've derailed. Back on enemy territory. Phantasma stopped for a moment. Then she looked at the watch. The Omnitrix. You keep getting stronger. We keep getting records of more and more aliens. All so powerful, can you blame them for wanting me to be ready? In case those were turned against the people of Russia. To that, I could only open my mouth and realize I didn't have much of an answer. I had thought about it. What if? What if, somehow, someone got the watch off of me, used it on others? Or if I got brainwashed? Or if some evil version of me got shat out by a mirror dimension a la Star Trek? I could do a lot of damage. All of us could. Hawkeye was considered one of the weakest of us. He was also one of the most skilled killers on Earth, and he'd been getting stronger. If he got turned somehow, well, I didn't like the idea of feeling cold steel slicing through my throat. So, is that why we were talking? I asked. So you could get a read on me. I was curious, she said with obvious reluctance. And your advice was helpful. Hey, I sighed. Well, you're welcome. You aren't responding how I thought you would. Phantasma uncrossed her arms. Yeah, well, I've gotten more death threats than most, I shrugged. Yours is the most polite so far. She blinked, then smirked. That's not funny. It's hilarious. I rubbed the back of my neck. Was I not taking this seriously enough? Russia had been training people specifically to be able to kill me. How the hell was I supposed to take that? Look, I'm just processing. If it helps, it's all a worst-case scenario. Mikhail always told us to ignore the idea of fighting the Avengers. To remember our priority is the people of Russia, the people of Earth. That is what we fight for, train for. She sounded earnest. Not asking for forgiveness, but at least understanding. I looked down at her. She met my eyes without fear. You know I'll have to tell my bosses. I expect it. And Chernobog will be punished for telling you. But you really don't want to kill me. Not unless I have to. Well, do you think you have to? She thought about it for longer than I was comfortable with before shaking her head. No, I don't. I never did, but I'm not the only one who was trained to kill you. She nodded behind me. I turned around. Sergei was watching us from the end of the hallway. He was flipping a knife in the air, catching it, then flipping it into the air again. When he saw that we'd noticed him, he gave a nod, then walked away, flipping his Bowie knife all along. He's been training for weeks, for the chance, Phantasma said softly. I gulped nervously. As I said, I don't like the idea of cold steel slicing through my throat. But then I narrowed my eyes and breathed. Nat had trained me better than to be intimidated by this. That's the thing. I've been training too, so I'll tell my bosses. But you should let our bosses know. I turned to look at her. I'd rather work with you guys. I'm nice like that. That said, if you do try to kill me, no amount of training in the world will be enough to finish me. She didn't seem to know how to take that. Until then, I held out a hand. Frenemies. She frowned, cocking her head in confusion. Frenum, what is that? She asked, giving up on saying the word midway. Friends who might kinda be enemies. Like Tom and Jerry, she stared, still not understanding. A cartoon where a cat tries to eat a mouse, but they're kinda best friends too. Oh, like, she asked. If that helps you, I said, wondering what the hell well, just you wait was. She bit her lip again, then nodded and took my hand, shaking it. Friends that are enemies, then. Great, once our handshake was done, I looked behind me. Now, as my new frenemy, what the hell is with having the darkness on your team? Do not get me started, she said with a shake of her head. He is powerful, dangerous, and a completist volach. I hear that, I grumbled. Just then, my stomach growled. The two of shared a look. Phantasma giggled, and I chuckled. Come, she turned and led me away. I have threatened you with death enough. Now I will feed you. Do I get a chance to try that borscht stuff? I joked. Bleh, she stuck her tongue out, disgusted. No, I hate beets. We will have pirozhki. That last was said with an excited skip in her step. With that, she led me away. Chapter 107, Sharon and Trip. Sergei Kravinov / the Hunter. Sergei thought quietly to himself as he prowled the hallways of the Winter Guard base, nostrils flaring. He continued to flip his Bowie knife in his hand. Dial and Alloy. How wonderful that they had arrived. When the squalid mess that was now the remains of the formerly powerful Russian government came to him with an offer, he'd been ready to refuse immediately. The country his mother and father had once loved had changed. No dignity, no honor. Like all civilization, only in the jungles and forests had he been able to find that. Men would eat when they were full, kill with explosives and disease. Animals killed, but only for things that made sense. And they didn't waste time on fruitless things, like the internet or television. All actions had a reason. Animals and plants didn't do things just to have fun, they did them to survive. Even play was training and exercise for animals. In many ways, he'd been proven right. A country of fear, of pompous and overblown displays like the one at the airport. Disgusting. But all that time ago, when he'd been approached, they showed him things. Beings of incredible power. Beings they wanted his help in learning how to kill. How fun. Since then, he'd been training again. The thought process had been fascinating. He'd devoured hours of research on the Avengers and their allies, watching video clips carefully. The footage of their enemies was just as fascinating. One of the best ways to hunt a predator is to watch it during its own hunts. To follow the same trails its prey uses. And now, he had two of them where he could watch. Now was not the time to hunt them, of course. That was the fun, of course. Patience was the most important part. Patience made all things so much sweeter. Craven stopped walking. Melinda May stood there. He hadn't noticed her. Hadn't he? In all his time back in civilization, no one had evaded his senses. Until this woman. How intriguing. Did you need something? Sergei asked politely. He kept his hands open, his stance wide. She noticed. Mikhail and Vanguard are looking for you, she said simply. I'm on my way to talk to Carlson. Sergei let out a grunt of acknowledgement, then moved to walk around her. She was still. Oh so still. As he stepped around her, he could feel it. The same as hunting panthers in the jungle. That tense moment when you couldn't tell just who was the true prey. He almost sighed in happiness. To think, in this pile of civilized rot, he would be reminded so much of the thrill of the jungle. Civilization was still a waste. But less so than it might have been once. Mrs. May, Sergei said with an honest smile as he passed. Thank you for this. Truly. With that, he left, all the while feeling eyes like blades digging into his back. Exquisite. Mahmoud Shaft / Dial. March 12, 2014. The morning after though, my favorite geeks had come upon a solution. They gathered us in a room together and started explaining what they'd found. With a torn apart body lying down in front of us. They're clones? I asked. Yes. Simmons sounded absolutely fascinated. And no, they are technically genetically engineered from the same DNA. They could almost be seen as being related, but they're clones, without a doubt. However, further research shows they were grown in pieces in vats. There's no sign of cuts where they are joined to cybernetics. Instead, they were specifically grown to be melded to robotics. And the technology in their limbs is from cybertech, at least the main crux of it, using Chitauri-derived energy cells to power the weaponry. Fitz continued. What sort of weapons? May asked. Plasma energy weapons, razor-sharp claws, and a hell of a left hook, Sky said, rubbing her arms with a grimace. She was still in full armor. In fact, all of us were ready to fight, if need be. I had my sword resting in my right hand and my gun on my back with my full armor on. Creel had switched to his vibranium form, and even May looked more serious than usual. Of course, we aren't sure if these are just foot soldiers or not. Fitz rubbed the back of his neck nervously. This could be the elite, the standard, or Dash. Or Kragoff has more powerful creatures ready to attack with, Vanguard snarled. Seriously, 90% of his dialogue seemed to be snarling. At the least, we know they can be killed by us, Dynamo said. But there are also markers of early Russian experimentation into cybernetics, as well as some engineering similar to that found in records from Hydra we found when we purged them from our nation. What is with bad guys making Lego sets out of superpowers? I grumbled. Can't blame them for taking the easy way to superpowers, Creel mumbled. You would know. The two of us looked over at Vanguard. He was glaring at Creel. Creel had just enough time to get angry before Sky spoke up. Anyways, we managed to find out why they woke up when I hacked them. Sky raised an arm and her hologram emitter created a map. They were all programmed with a way to head back home. GPS coordinates, in a way. Sky smirked. But, once I got through their defenses, we were able to track them here. The map blinked and a dot appeared in a spot northeast of Moscow. YAAI northeast. Sergei smiled. Ah, the forests. He's hidden away. And probably has a base to do it. Carlson crossed his arms. I don't like going in not knowing what we can face, but we have to start early. Boris. Yes, Carlson, the overweight politician said politely. Can you let High Command know what's happening? If we can get military forces to organize while we head in, we can keep this contained. Agreed. Boris walked out, presumably to go do that. He probably knows we might try to attack him. Vanguard, Mikhail, I'd like to invite the Winter Guard to fly on the bus with us, Carlson said, crossing his arms and swaying in place. Probably best if we have our strongest assets together, moving as fast as possible. Vanguard and Mikhail shared a look. They seemed to communicate nonverbally as we watched before Mikhail nodded. Agreed. Vanguard looked around. I assume we leave now. As soon as I get the bus ready, May answered in the affirmative. Wheels up in 5, then, Carlson turned and headed out. Later, on the bus, I walked down the stairs to join Crimson Dynamo and Fitz just as they were about to enter the lab. Hey, May is about to lift off. You guys all good to go? Yes, Fitz smiled, then looked up at Dynamo. Oh, I don't know how comfortable you'd be about this, but my lab isn't really. I mean Dash. It's too small, duh. To his credit, the armored man sounded more amused than offended. Fitz chuckled self-consciously. Sorry. Don't worry about your tech, I tried to say in a reassuring voice. We aren't going to hack it or something. I was not worried about that until you said it. Fitz and I shared a surprised look and I quickly tried to save face. I didn't mean it, I was just trying to dash. A low rumbling chuckle erupted from the suit. Joking. Only joking. Here, it is best we begin our work as soon as possible. Some surprisingly quiet noises filled the room. Fitz and I watched with bated breath as the back of the armor opened up. Faster than I would have guessed, the figure exited the suit to crawl over it and drop on the floor with a hop. The figure was shorter than Fitz, almost rail-thin, wearing workman's boots and a blue jumpsuit that seemed built for both mechanics and pilots. Brown hair streaked with blonde flipped in the air, green-flecked brown eyes gazing on us. Fitz and I shared a surprised look, then looked back. What? Dynamo's pilot blinked up at us. Nothing whatsoever. What could Dash? Fitz stuttered nervously. I assumed you were a guy, I said bluntly. Crimson Dynamo, a near-dead ringer for Mila Kunis, scoffed at me, waving an uncaring hand. Well, I suppose that makes sense. Come on, we have work to do. She spun on her heel, ponytail spinning in the air, and strode into the lab, somehow still stomping with the same amount of force as when she'd been in the suit. I think if we work together, we can come up with some ways to take advantage of enemy weaknesses, maybe a hacking program of some sort? What do you think, Dr. Fitz? Fitz gave me a hesitant look. I shrugged. Hey dude, she's cool as shit. Didn't really have personal skin in the gender thing anyway. My fellow nerd opened and closed his mouth. I just don't. He spun to look at Dynamo. Do you have a real name? I laughed, honestly surprised by that. Dynamo turned to look at him, then chuckled. Galina Nemirovsky. It was kinda funny how husky her voice sounded. Very deep for such a petite person. Fitz looked at me, then at her. He seemed rather nonplussed for a moment. Then he breathed deeply and strode into the lab. Okay, you said something about weaknesses? If we can isolate the main power for the machines, it's possible we can disrupt them. I think you're right. Galina, cool name, grabbed a tablet and started tapping at it. I think we should focus on somehow making them a Keystone Army. What? Fitz asked, confused. A Keystone Army, an army that dies once one thing is activated, destroyed, or removed. These are all connected, duh. If we can force that connection, maybe we can find some way to shut them down all at once. I walked up the stairs, figuring I wasn't as useful right now. As I entered the halls, I ended up walking past an image of the world map. I stopped to stare at Russia, panning my eyes across it as the bus hummed around me. I turned away and headed away, wondering how my friends were doing. Antoine triplet/a friend. In a small laboratory in the middle of China, a scared scientist rushed through his lab, trying not to scream. Behind him, screams filled the air. The sound of blades slicing through flesh was followed by one of the screams going silent. The scientist went around a corner and found himself bumping into someone. The man screamed. Whoa, whoa, whoa. The person he'd bumped into backed off with a worried look on his face. In English, the man spoke. It's okay, I'm Bridgeman, you're okay. The scientist breathed a sigh of relief as he looked at the man. He was tall, with dark black skin, and very well built. He was wearing a strange armored suit similar to the ones bridge soldiers wore on the TV. Theory behind me, the scientist stammered fearfully. The man frowned, looking behind him then nodding. Okay, come on. Putting a hand on his back, he led the scientist away. When the man smiled, the scientist relaxed even more. The man had a very confident demeanor and a charming smile. What are they looking for? The man asked with some concern. In hesitant and accented English, the scientist spoke. We've been experimenting with a new form of computer chip, using new materials. I am just a scientist, Hey, the man, with concern, patted the scientist's back as he led him along the hallway. The smile the man gave him calmed the scientists. It's okay. Look, if it's just an experiment, we don't have to worry. As long as you don't have an actual chip, I can get you out. We don't have to worry about Hydra getting their hands on it, right? The scientist stopped. The man looked at him in surprise. There is a prototype. The man's face fell. What could they want with it? The scientist asked. Don't think about it, the man said hesitantly. And no, tell me, the scientist shouted. The man shook his head. It's Hydra. That was enough for the scientist. We have to get it out, to stop them. It's too dangerous, the man shouted. Please. Hesitantly, the man stared in the direction of the exit. Then he sighed sadly. Okay, lead the way. The man took out his pistol. The scientist nodded, still scared but determined. This way. The pair went running down the hallways. The scientist let out a shout when bullets flew past them. The man fired back, pushing the scientist along. Go, go, go. Ah, the scientist screamed. They entered a small room at the end of the hallway. The scientist stopped in front of a keypad to a door. Give me a minute. I'll do my best, the man said, worried. They stood for a tense moment as the scientist tapped at the keypad. Okay, the scientist turned, only for his eyes to widen in horror. A round shield was spinning towards his head. Down, the man from bridge pulled him out of the way. The shield flew past where his head had been, bounced off 2 walls, then flew back. Is that Captain America's shield? The scientist stammered as the man pulled him into the room. I wish, the man said, pulling the door closed. Still terrified, the scientist gulped. Over here, he guided the man deeper into the room. The place was cold, extremely so. Dozens of monitors were set up everywhere. The scientist ran to a set of lockers. They were going to do some more test on it, but it's pretty much good to go already. Then we stopped Hydra in time, the man said. He sighed sadly for some reason as the scientist began to press numbers on another keypad. By the way man, my name's Trip. What's yours? My name? Oh, it's Lee Jei. The scientist, back turned, opened the locker and let out a little sound at the sight of the device behind all the trouble. He smiled with some hope. Lee Jei. I'll remember it. A single shot rang out in the room. Trip's face was neutral as he watched the scientist fall to the floor, a hole in the back of his head. He stepped up the body and turned it face up, closing the man's eyes. Then he reached into the locker and plucked out the chip, putting it in his pocket. Without a look back, he left for the door. When it slid open, 2 women were waiting for him. One was tall, with long curly blonde hair. She wore a white skin-tight combat suit, carrying a pistol in one hand and a dented round metal shield in the other. The other woman was barely out of her teens, rail thin, with pale skin and long straight black hair. She carried no weapons and wore only a black tank top and blue jeans. However, a pair of long crystal blades could be seen stabbing out of each of her hands, 2 from each hand, with another pair of blades from her feet and another from her shoulders. As Trip walked up to them, the blade retracted into her skin, the cuts they'd created healing. Sharon, Laura, Trip said with no emotion. Are you done? The 2 women shared a look, then looked back at Trip. Yes. Everyone is dead. Are you okay? Sharon asked. Trip scowled. Yes. I have the chip. Laura, the young woman cocked her head to the side. You have someone's blood on your cheek. She let out a little of surprise, quickly scrubbing at her face. Let's go. Trip turned and led them to the exit. We have work to do. Chapter 108, Mikhail. Have work to do. Agent Phil Coulson. This is fascinating. Mikhail lifted a single cigarette, staring at it as though it was much more than that. What sort of power source does it use to produce the laser? Simple batteries, the kind Howard Stark was developing years back, Coulson said eagerly. The pair were standing in Coulson's office in the bus, looking at the shelves behind his desk filled with old spy gear. They stood side by side as they geeked out over the tech. Incredible. I've seen similar devices in museums, but none in such good condition. Mikhail put it down and lifted another device. Now, I'm tempted to think you'd left a few American coins here. He displayed a quarter, one of a couple. Walkie-talkie, Coulson said as an answer. Mikhail chuckled, shaking his head. Amazing. The best I have is an old insecticopter the CIA used. The Dragonfly one? Coulson asked. Man, I always wanted one of those. Well, I would trade you, but I left mine at home, Mikhail joked. Coulson chuckled. Both men stepped around the desk to stand across from each other, Carlson leaning against his desk and crossing his arms. I'll be honest, a lot of people don't seem to get my love of old school tech. Same for me, Mikhail chuckled. I get jokes about, what is the word? Midlife crisis, duh. Yeah, I've gotten that sometimes, Carlson chuckled as well. Mikhail shook his head. Where did you get yours? I often have to buy some from private collectors. I imagine the cigarette laser would be quite a lot. Here, Carlson found his good humor fading. Well, I did the same thing for most of my stuff. But the laser and the quarters were a gift from a friend. Someone I lost a while back. Mikhail gave Carlson a sympathetic look. I'm sorry. Don't be, Carlson scowled. We're working on getting him back. He was captured. By Hydra? Yeah. Mikhail hissed. Hydra. Animals, all of them. How are Nazis still a thing? You're asking me. Carlson chuckled. So how does a guy like you end up in charge of superhumans? I could ask you the same, Mikhail replied. Not just two Avengers, but the young woman with that armor of hers. Carlson smirked. Dial and Alloy are just helping. As for Sky, the armor and the martial arts are more of a recent thing. Fair enough, Mikhail hummed. As for me, I have a unique understanding of superhuman individuals. I've been a soldier all my life as well as trained them. I know people and I know fighters. So, I volunteered. They are good people, Agent Carlson. And Phantasma has. Mikhail winced and stopped suddenly. After a moment, Carlson understood. Truly understood. Mikhail didn't speak. Sky has really grown recently. She was raw, at first. But I'm proud of the women she's become. Mikhail nodded, a soft smile on his face. I understand. I'm sure you do, Carlson frowned. What about Chernobog? Mikhail winced. I don't get all the choices I wish I could on who joins the team. Chernobog is a sacrifice, in more ways than one. But he is powerful. Power that is necessary. There was a tense silence in the room. Finally Mikhail hesitantly coughed. Well, I suppose I should go check in on my team. Same, Carlson got up from his desk. Mind if I join you? Of course, Agent Carlson. As they walked out, Carlson kept his thoughts to himself. But seriously, for a man who'd been training a team to be able to kill the Avengers if need be, Mikhail was very friendly. Carl Kree/Alloy. So we're flying off to fight some guy who's turning monkeys into super cyborg monkeys, Creel said as he sat on a chair in the lounge, holding his phone up so the camera could see him. I should have never left New York. Isabel chuckled from his phone's screen. What? And New York isn't weird enough. The naked cowboy is still doing his thing in Times Square. Yeah, not as weird as this, Creel returned wryly. She laughed. But man, Russia has their own Avengers? Have you guys already been getting pissy with each other? Well, Dial told me they've been trained to kill the other Avengers, Creel said wryly. Isabel blinked. Seriously? Does Carlson know? We told him and the director. Creel leaned back in his seat. She told us to keep it from the rest of the team for now and do our jobs, but to also be ready to fight back if we have to. The magic one, Phantasma, she was forced to admit it. Phantasma, Isabel mused. Now she is just hot as hell. And she's got a hell of an outfit. Think I'd look good in it. You'd look good in anything. Now that is the correct answer. Creel smirked. Suddenly, Vanguard strode into the room. Creel looked up at him, then back at the phone. I got to go, babe. Talk to you later. Later. Isabel hung up, and Creel put his phone away. As he did, Creel and Vanguard eyed each other from across the room. Girlfriend? Vanguard asked. Something like that, Creel answered. Vanguard nodded slowly. He removed his shield from his arm, placing it alongside a chair and sitting down. I would like, Mr. Creel, to settle something with you. Vanguard, to Creel's surprise, reached up and pulled back his mask. The man had thick black hair and brown eyes, his skin slightly lighter where the mask didn't cover it. Creel had to wonder how often he wore the mask that it actually affected his tan. Okay, Creel leaned forward curiously. I am a soldier, Mr. Creel, a man who works to defend the honor of my country. I protect them. Even now, as a superhuman, I continue that. Vanguard's eyes narrowed. But I am also a man who likes to trust those he works with. And you don't trust me. Creel shook his head. What the hell did I ever do to you? You are a criminal. Former? Creel growled. I'm a former criminal. And I've been making my amends. Amends. Vanguard snarled. You were a criminal, a dishonorable M who killed on behalf of Hydra. I was mind-controlled, you colossal dick. Yes, you were. But before that? How am I to fight alongside a man who cheated his way through life, took the easy route to everything? Creel nodded slowly. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. But let me respond with this. Creel rose up carefully. I've spent every day since I became an Avenger redeeming myself for the shit I caused. But I didn't do it to prove something to anyone but myself. If you want me to bend over for me to work for you, I'm just not going to. I'm going to do my job. And while I'm at it, kiss my ass, you absolute fuck. Creel couldn't help one last dig. At least I'm not the one working for a literal god of evil. He turned and walked away. Vanguard spun to his feet, reaching for his shield. With rage in his eyes. Nikolai. Creel and Vanguard stopped, turning to look. Carlson and Mikhail were standing there. Carlson looked surprised. Mikhail, on the other hand, looked pissed off. What are you doing? Mikhail, Vanguard said, a look of shame on his face. Come, without another word, Mikhail walked away. Vanguard scowled but immediately followed. Do I want to know? Carlson asked Creel as the Russians left the room. Probably not, Creel admitted. Hey, Dial walked in from the direction the Russians had left in, looking confused. What the hell just happened? Mikhail looks pissed off. Creel sighed in annoyance. Leopold Fitz. Fitz sighed, annoyed by the sight of the word simulation failed in front of him. It's a good thing this is a long flight because I have plenty of time to fail. Well, as we say back home, Galina said, tapping at a tablet nearby. Fitz looked over at her. And that means? Galina looked up blinking. Oh, well, the literal translation is, without torture, there is no science. The closest counterpart would be no pain, no gain. Without torture, there is no science. I like it, Fitz said with a chuckle. Fitz. Simmons came in with a smile. I was wondering where you, who is this? Simmons stopped, looking over at Galina. Her smile faded into confusion. Oh, Fitz pointed over at Galina, then realized what was happening. This is Galina. Hello Simmons, Galina said, not looking up from her tablet. The screen flashed red again. VOT Edo Pizdak. Okay, Simmons walked around to join Fitz. She whispered as soon as she was close. Who is she? The Crimson Dynamo's pilot, Fitz whispered back. Really? Simmons sounded intrigued. And also something else he couldn't quite read. Which was odd, because Fitz usually had a very easy time reading Simmons' emotions. I didn't expect her to be so, well pretty. Fitz asked. Female, Simmons looked up at him, shocked. What did you say? Nothing. I thought you said Nope. Simmons scowled, displeased. Edna Hui, it isn't working. Galina scowled, tossing her tablet onto the table. It's so strange. Like something is blocking us. After another look Fitz couldn't read, Simmons walked over to the tablet. What are you trying to do? Simmons asked. Maybe I could help. Galina opened her mouth, then shrugged, walking over to join Simmons. We are attempting to find some way to shut down the servitors. If we can affect their limbs or their cybernetics, maybe we can force them to freeze in place. But every time we try, something blocks us from the cybernetics. Or, not restarts, reboots them. Well, Kragoff is a genius, Simmons noted. When we were researching earlier, I noted that the mixture of vat-grown flesh and cybernetics was almost elegant. Like he genetically engineered the monkey flesh specifically Tonith robotics. As though one structure can't exist without the other. Galina took the tablet. I have noticed that the robotics wouldn't have worked if he hadn't removed the organs and limbs first. But if what you say is true, maybe we need to interfere with the biological component as well. Fitz frowned, thinking on that as well. For some reason, every time they attempted to shut down the robotics they would just reactivate. If Simmons was right though, I have an idea. Galina grabbed a different tablet and tapped at it. If Sky can work with us on this As she spoke, Mikhail walked into the lab, drawing everyone's attention. He was followed by Vanguard, who to Fitz's surprise wasn't wearing his mask. Mikhail walked past them with a nod to Galina, waving a hand for her to follow. She frowned, placing her tablet down and following without a word to Simmons and Fitz. The pair of bridge scientists shared a look while the Russians left. What was that about? Fitz asked. Trouble in the ranks, maybe. Simmons replied. Mikhail looked rather angry. The two shared an uncertain look before going back to work. Galina Nemirovsky/Crimson Dynamo. Galina strode after Mikhail and Nikolai. The trio stopped in a room that was likely used for basic storage, considering the cleaning products around them. As soon as the door closed behind her, Galina spoke in her native Russian. What happened? You want to tell her? Mikhail asked Nikolai. No, Galina said firmly. Don't pull that bullshit, just say what the issue is, now. She was not someone to waste time. Time was to be spent on things of value, in the end. Not stupid back and forth. You want to tell her? No I don't, you better tell her. Stupid. Mikhail scowled. Fine. He was moments from attacking Alloy. Why? Galina said immediately. Nikolai, the man who had taken the name Vanguard, hesitated. Galina nudged him, impatient. He sighed. The man is a criminal. I don't trust him. Then don't, Galina said simply. But we all have a job to do, and that includes working with him. We have enough unstable elements on our team. Nikolai looked at her, anger in his eyes. Galina, he's just part of the problem. We've discussed this, Mikhail protested. No, we haven't, Nikolai clenched his fist. He is a monster, not a god. And yet, we've been forced to accept him on our team? That unstable beast. Nikolai, Galina said firmly. No. Nikolai slashed a hand down. Chernobyl devours life. He freely admits to killing to survive, killing for pleasure. And yet, he is rewarded. You know why he's on the team, Mikhail said firmly. He can absorb gamma radiation, become stronger from it, and his physical abilities match those of Thor. If we need to combat the Avengers I don't care about the Avengers, Nikolai scoffed. We all know that the necessity of fighting them is a long shot at best. Well, the men who give us funding do. And they demand that we have counters to Bridge's superhumans, Mikhail sighed sadly. For a tense moment, both men stared at each other. My father died for this country, Mikhail, Nikolai said, haunted. I just want to defend it honorably. And I'm forced to work with murderers and criminals. Nikolai, Galina said, drawing both men's attention. Chernobyl is a necessity. No, let me talk, she interrupted before he could respond. I agree that he's unstable. but he has been following orders, doing his job to the best of his ability. Same with Creel. You must put aside your personal feelings. You are a soldier. Focus on the mission, and as long as those under your command do the same, then work with them. And when Chernobog tries to devour our souls or Creel decides to run when things get too hard, Nikolai said softly. For the first, I'll kill him, Galina said simply. Nikolai and Mikhail shared a look. She rolled her eyes. The second I found out that he was joining us, I prepared for the moment I might need to fight him. I'm the greatest engineer in the world, I have a solution for him. Greatest. Mikhail raised an eyebrow. Isn't that star dash? He stopped when Galina glared at him, the man chuckling. As for Creel, any research will tell you that he has a good record as an Avenger. You don't have to like him but dash. Fine. Vanguard was staring at his shield as he spoke. The others stared at it as well. I miss him as well, Galina said softly. He was a good man, Mikhail agreed. Vanguard only nodded sadly. For him. I'll accept all of this for him. Reluctantly. Chapter 109, Sudden Attack. Mahmoud /dial. Vanguard looked like Joe Manganiello. Craven looked like Manu Bennett, both of whom had played Deathstroke. Did that mean something? Other than both men being very badass looking? I had plenty of time to think it over as I stood behind the bar, making a milkshake for myself. Carlson was nice enough to get me some ice cream, milk, and bananas since I didn't drink. I made myself a coffee milkshake this time, turning around to see Sky. Mind if I get one? She asked hesitantly. She was wearing a black sweater and blue jeans, though I could see her armor standing on the other side of the room. After a moment, I nodded. Yeah, of course. If you like coffee, I mean. I love it. She watched as I poured the milkshakes into glasses. This is all so weird, right? Super monkeys and Russian Avengers, I mean. Is it that weird? I handed her a cup. I mean, we spent a lot of time fighting dinosaurs and all that in Rio. You did, Sky corrected. I was mostly hacking computers and phones. Still, that is a good point. When did life get so crazy? May 4th, 2012, I smirked. When aliens fell out of the sky. Oh, right. She sipped at her drink, then winced. Too many bananas. I took a sip as well and shrugged. I like it. Sky leaned back in the seat in front of the bar. She looked thoughtful coming upon an idea. I picked up a rag and started wiping it down. You know, I don't drink. But people tell me talking to bartenders helps. She laughed. Helps with what? Hell if I know. I usually talk to my friends, I said with a shrug. Well, I'm just a little nervous. This will be the first mission we've been on in a while without full Avengers support. Or bridge soldiers. It's just us. And the Winter Guard. And me and Creel, I reminded her. You know the battle plan, she responded. I'm probably going to have to fight. For real, this time. And I don't know if I'm ready. I put a straw in my drink, shaking my head. Hey, none of us know. But you've been getting your ass kicked right next to me for the past few weeks. Oh yeah, Sky's brown eyes flashed with mirth. Nat and Steve are mean. Ruby doesn't help. Getting my ass kicked in training by that mean midget is the highlight of my day. I sipped at my milkshake slowly. Is this awkward? Me and you, like this? Sky asked uncomfortably. I stopped sipping my drink, placing it in between us. Are we still friends? Of course we are, she said without thinking. I couldn't help my relief at that. Ridiculous, that I'd be relieved about that as though it was in question, but I still felt it. Awkward is fine. Means we cared enough that we were worried. I held out a hand placing it on one of hers. She smiled down at our joined hands. Whatever happens, I'm your friend. And I'll always have your back. Okay. She turned her hand in mine, gripping it. Yeah, thanks, Mahmoud. I smiled. For some reason, I felt like something had been released then. I pulled my hand back and sighed. It was a sigh of relief. Like something that had been tied in my chest for a while finally released. There was just another thing I had to do, but that would have to wait till I got back home. How long until we get there? Phantasma asked later. The young Russian woman was leaning back in her chair, Chernobog roaming around us while I passed her a drink, one I'd poured from a bottle I noticed her eyeing. Didn't know what the drink was, but she seemed pleased with it, so I must have guessed right. Should be about 15 minutes, I told her. We'll land in the forest outside the base. I figured, since the three of us are Team 3, we might as well talk. That is so nice of you, Chernobog said softly, just behind me. Although, I wonder why you didn't offer me a drink. Because you don't drink wine, I said softly. Heh, Dracula, Chernobog smiled. One of many things I love about this new world. So much pleasant entertainment. Yeah, you seem like a real nerd, I returned. Seriously, tall, dark, and freaky, you want something. Blood, I raised an eyebrow. Why Mary? He grinned as he said that. Well, I don't know how to mix that, so, I waved at the bar. He let out a dismissive snort, walking around to the bar. Phantasma looked between us while sipping at the drink I'd given her. You know, you're real friendly sometimes. Why do you switch between that and being a manipulative asshole? He chuckled, somehow grabbing the ingredients he needed with finesse despite his massive hands. Well, I said it before. I love this new world. So much more fun. I love seeing all the little ways people act out. So you're a troll, I said simply. The darkness shrugged, apparently unoffended. Phantasma, on the other hand, frowned. A troll? Like the mystical creature. I thought of Ulick. Not so mystical, I said with a scowl before shaking my head. But in American culture, a troll is someone who acts like an asshole specifically to get a reaction. Phantasma let out a little of understanding. Troll. Makes sense. Only for a purpose, Chernobyl came back to us. I rarely go on rampages anymore, so I get my kicks elsewhere. He sat down next to me, placing a massive arm on my shoulders. I pushed him off, got up, and moved to a different chair, getting a mock pout for my troubles. Fuck me, even his pouting was horrifying. Actually, if I ever get to visit America, I'm going to do some sightseeing. I frowned at the sudden change in topic. Okay. He chugged back his drink, tossing the glass aside when he was done. Oh yes. Look, from out of nowhere, he handed me a paper list. I looked over at Phantasma, who seemed as confused as I felt, before hesitantly grabbing it and reading it. This is nothing but places in different states named Bald Mountain. He gave me a toothy grin. Well, after watching Fantasia I can't help but laugh, thinking of how people will react to me showing up. Even downloaded the song. I opened and closed my mouth. Damn it, I don't know if that's hilarious or cruel. Can't I be both? Phantasma rolled her eyes. You really are dash. Boom. The whole plane shook suddenly, sending us all tumbling. I got up to my feet at the same time as the others. What the hell was dash? An explosion came from the wall behind me. I shouted a wordless scream as I was sucked out of the plane. For a breathless moment, I tumbled through the air. The stars and clouds were replaced by the ground, then came back, around and around. Phew dash, I kept shouting as I reached for the Omnitrix. Still screaming, I flipped through the menu. For a breathless moment, I had to fight off the urge to just smack the Omnitrix. Instead, I pushed it down. My skin was replaced with soft black and blue spots, like that of a moth. I unfurled my wings with a shout, my descent slowing until I was floating thousands of feet in the air. Big chill. I stared up at the plane. Its lights were flickering. I could see strange figures buzzing around the bus, purple lights flashing from them as they ripped into it. What the hell was that? Dial. Phantasma floated down to join me. You're okay. Same to you, I said back. Didn't know you could fly. Phantasma's boots were surrounded by purple sparks, making it look like she was somehow dancing on air. She looked up as darkness floated down to join us. That was fun. Chernobyl was somehow standing on nothing, the way Soul Reapers from Bleach did, helped by a pair of bat wings he unfurled from his back. Wings he'd had no indication that he had before. He looked up at the plane. Food. Come on. I shot upwards, Phantasma and Chernobyl following. This fight ain't over. As we flew up, Phantasma came along to my right, her boots releasing sparks at a faster pace. She had to yell to be heard over the wind of the chill Russian skies. You think it's servitors? Does it really matter? I asked with a look toward her. Phantasma frowned. I suppose it doesn't. Dial? This is Carlson, can you hear me? The Omnitrix symbol on my chest shouted. I'm here. I shouted back. Thank God. Sky yelled through the Omnitrix as well. We're under assault by unknown aerial enemies. Carlson shouted. I'm going to fight back with the cannon turrets. Sky and Dynamo will join you in the air? We need to take these things out and land as soon as possible. See you soon. With that I charged forward. The enemies flying about the bus seemed to notice, because a bunch of them spun in the air, spinning to come toward us. Lunch. Kirobig barked. Weirdly, unlike the last time he'd spoken in his real voice, I felt nothing. The enemies came close enough that I could finally see them. A face of metallic fangs and fuzz, eyes of flickering light as tiny arms ending in tubes aimed at us. They had wings of metal and rockets set into their backs. And they were babies. Very clearly baby apes. Cherubim servitors. Baby servitors, I realized. Dude has problems, I mumbled in reference to Kragoff. Before I could say anything else, the flying monkeys with lasers were firing at us. I quickly went intangible, letting the shots pass through me. I flew through one of the monkeys, freezing it in midair, then spun around while going tangible. I raised my hands and blasted out 2 beams from my palms, freezing another monkey, going intangible again when a monkey flew down to blast me. When I fired back at it, our shots met in midair. According to Tony and Fitz, plasma shots tended to be ionized gas that was fired through magnetic fields with extremely hot temperatures, unless I was way misremembering. Whatever the case, when plasma met a beam that could freeze anything instantaneously, it exploded. The Wicked Witch gave you some upgrades. I shouted at my opponent. The monkey only fired another beam. I tucked my wings in and dive away from it, unfurling my moth wings again to fire at it and freeze it. Phantasma raised her hands and made some elegant hand motions, another purple mandala coming to life in front of her. Several servitors fired at her, their plasma shots making ripples across the mandala shield with no effect. She clenched her fists, clapped them together, then swirled them outward, a sword of violet fire appearing in her left hand. With an intricate flowing motion of her right fingers, she let out a blast that flew through her mandala, knocking a servitor out of the air. When one flew around her shield, she slashed at it, cutting an arm off, then blasted it again. Chernobyl was nowhere near as elegant. He charged forward, ignoring the plasma shots tearing into his form. He opened his mouth wide, and something flew out of one of the servitors, a ghostly wailing figure. The servitor shuddered in place, still firing, but somehow with none of the energy of the others. The wailing ghost flew into Chernobyl's mouth. He swallowed. Artificial, mangled and stillborn. Not the least bit filling, he smiled. But I don't mind overeating. With that, he roared forward, grabbing a monkey out of the air and digging his teeth into it. Sparks flew, blood and viscera pouring down his gold chest armor in streams, the sound of him eating sickening. It didn't help that he was still joking around. Number. Take them out and get to the bus. I shouted, diving aside from another plasma shot. I flew to go back to back with Phantasma. We rotated together, me firing at anything that came towards her back while she protected mine. I blasted a monkey, then froze another plasma shot to explode it. The monkey I froze was about to fall to the ground far below before Chernobog grabbed it and took a bit. Like ice cream, he said pleasantly, diving through the air to claw at another. Hurry up. I shouted at him, breathing out a cold mist before continuing. We need to join the others. Agreed. Phantasma slashed out at a monkey, cursing when she missed. Chernobog flew by and tackled the servitor she'd missed, tearing it apart in a spray of blood and oil as black teeth tore through red flesh. Phantasma waved a hand and blasted another servitor apart. Come on. Flying together, we charged upwards, fighting our way toward the bus. Chapter 110, Fight in Sky. Phil Coulson / leader of Team S.H.I.E.L.D. Phil rushed into a room with 2 joysticks in front of a screen, sitting down and initializing the weapons as fast as possible. May, how long can you keep us in the sky? She responded over the plane's speakers. I'm barely keeping us up as it is. We need to either land or evacuate as soon as possible. Get ready for either one. Phil shouted as the plane shuddered, the loud sound of plasma shots slamming into his bus making Phil grit his teeth. The screens came up, the cameras showing the monkey servitors outside. Phil grabbed the joysticks and aimed at the monkey with an angry smile. He began to pull the trigger. Outside, on the wings of the bus, twin cannon turrets rose out of hatches. Phil aimed them at the targets and pulled the triggers, blasting one of the monkeys out of the sky. Eat your heart out, Luke Skywalker, he quipped, spinning the cannon turrets to fire again and again, trying to stave off the destruction of his plane. It very quickly became clear that he was fighting a losing battle. The damn things were rocketing around too fast, ducking and diving through the air while firing at the bus. He took out a couple, but there were dozens of the things. Phil frowned in disappointment when one of the cannon turrets got taken out. Sky, Dynamo, I could use some air support out there. Sky felt her armor fold into place over her body. She bit her lip as she ran toward the hole blown into the side of the bus, flying up and out. As soon as the wind hit her she had to compensate, twisting in the air to aim her boots so that she was flying alongside the bus. She fought against the high-speed winds of her flight. Her HUD showed a sudden drop in temperature, and she had to focus on her targets. She stopped to blink at the sight of the enemy. Are those flying monkeys? I know right. Phil said over the comms. Before Sky could respond, some of the buzzing monkeys twisted to shoot toward her. She yelped, twisting out of the way of a plasma shot, and fired one back. Her green shot hit a monkey, setting it on fire, but she was forced to hit it again when it kept shooting at her. With a twist, she shot to the right, then forward, aiming her hands and firing more plasma. The blasts flew past a few monkeys, hitting others. She yelped when a sudden burst of wind sent her sliding back, forced to compensate for it. While she did that, she was tackled by a monkey. It wrapped around her arms, Sky shouting in shock as a monkey baby started clawing at her armor. It raised an arm and prepared to fire plasma. Sky yelped out a command word. Shoulders. Her shoulder popped open, a pair of turrets sliding out. They twisted to fire at the monkey on her back, hitting it with a stream of bullets that sent it flying off. Sky shouted out again when a plasma shot grazed her thigh, scorching her armor. Her HUD screaming about the sudden rise in temperature and damage wasn't needed when her leg was screaming in pain. She grit her teeth, raised her arms, and started shooting, her shoulder guns joining. Come on, she roared, jet boots sending her flying forward to meet the monkeys. She took out 2, dodged another, then twisted to slam her elbow into another, spinning back to kick another. Another plasma shot nearly took her head off. She fired back, her shoulder turrets firing on auto while she forced down her emotions. Baby monkey viscera and cybernetics parts sprayed around her. She was panting as she fought, trying to stay calm and failing, getting clawed in the back before she spun out of the way and punched her opponent. Another one tried to tackle. In a desperate move, she struck with a palm strike at the same as she fired a plasma blast. The impact of the attack combined with the plasma shot sent the thing twisting away. Struck by inspiration, she struck another monkey the same way, trying to incorporate the techniques she'd learned from Nat, May, and Steve with the armor's plasma shots. Yeah, she cheered as another plasma palm strike knocked an opponent out of the air. More monkeys flew toward her, slowly trying to overwhelm her. Despite her desperate attempts to drive them back, another shot grazed her arm, the pain slowing her down. Gritting her teeth, she tried to fight back, sweat pouring down her lips to fill her mouth with the salty taste. Then lightning flew around her. Monkeys froze in the air, falling back behind her as electricity disrupted their systems. Sky looked down at the plane, where some more lightning flew up from to join the cannon turret fire. Crimson Dynamo stood firmly on top of the bus, hands raised and hatches that covered Leyden jar-looking devices opened all across her massive armored form. As Sky watched, Galena fired twin beams of searing blue light from her palms, blasting apart several of the servitors as they dived toward the business. Crackling lances of electricity surrounded her in a bubble, streams flowing into her hands then flying outward to meet with the monkeys, the white-blue attacks ripping them apart. She looked like a lightning rod in reverse, blasting the sky with power. Oh right, mag boots. Sky realized when she noted Crimson Dynamo somehow standing on the bus with ease. Dropping down, Sky landed next to Dynamo, sighing in relief when her own boots activated. At least she no longer had to fight the wind. You okay? Galena said as she unleashed power over and over toward their opponents in a brilliant display. Yeah, but it came close. Sky shouted, wincing at the pain from her grazed leg and arm. We must continue to defend the bus. Galena roared, gathering a ball of electricity in her palms before firing it as a beam. Before Sky could respond, more monkeys came from the sky. She fired her plasma beams, fire joining lightning, filling the air between them against more enemies. Sky used Crimson Dynamo as cover, the other woman's electric bubble able to take incoming fire. Then the monkeys started going all kamikaze on them, diving toward the bubble. When they slammed into it they would erupt in balls of purple energy, sending ripples across the bubble. Galena cursed out in caustic Russian. They are attempting to overwhelm me. Can they? With time. They don't have time, another voice said. Like a spirit, Big Chill floated up from the floor in between them, scaring the hell out of Sky. Apparently he'd chosen to just fly through the plan as a ghost instead of going around. As she watched, he unfurled his wings and snapped his hands up. Cold blue light flew from his palms, freezing the servitors. Sky shot one, while Dynamo hit another, sending beautiful flecks of frost across the sky. Phantasma flew overhead, waving her hands around in a circle then thrusting them forward. A gust of wind erupted with the motion, sending a group of monkeys tumbling through the air. She punched her fists together and held them outward, a pair of purple circles floating parallel to her knuckles that she used as shields. We're here, Carlson. Yum, with that little battle cry, the most terrifying thing she ever saw dropped from the night sky. Teeth dug into flesh and metal. A wailing soul was sucked into a gaping maw. All life in the area seemed to wane. Except Big Chill. Everyone else seemed to flinch, even the monkey servitors, but he fought just as hard. The others joined in. The bus itself continued to fire its cannon turrets while the heroes fought on top of it, flying around in a display of powers and lights. Funny. Years back, Sky would have given anything to be able to be in a fight like this. Kinda worth the wait, scary and painful as it was. Carl Creel/Alloy. Damn it, I should have gotten rocket boots. Carl cursed to himself as he fought his way through the rocking plane. Then I could be fighting out there. He'd switched to vibranium form. While he couldn't exactly contribute in the fight around them, he'd bounced enough times off the walls of the shaking bus that he was glad he'd done it. Carlson. In here. Losing his balance on the way, Creel slammed a fist into the wall, vibranium knuckles splitting apart steel. With that handhold, he forced his way into a room at the end of the hallway, where Phil was sat in front of 2 joysticks and a screen. May told me to check on you. Sparks flew from a console, a spray of some sort of gas shooting down from the ceiling. Carlson cocked an eyebrow at Creel. I'm doing okay, how about you? Creel had no idea what to do with such an unflappable response. Carlson turned back to the screen and kept shooting. We're losing systems all across the plane. May is barely keeping us up, and so far Galena has shattered my kill count. So no, I'm not doing so great. What should we do? Do we have a plan? Creel said worriedly. I mean, worst comes to worst I can just fall all the way down. Lucky you, Carlson said after a moment of hesitation. He shook his head. I hate to do this but, we need to evacuate the bus. If the engines fail, a lot of us are going to die, and I need everyone I can get for the next part. Carlson looked behind Creel. What do you think? Creel turned to see Mikhail standing behind him. It's our best option, Mikhail said with a shake of his head. I'm sorry, Carlson. Carlson rose from his seat. Sympathy later. We need to go, now. All 3 men rushed out, Creel and Mikhail helping Carlson along. Everyone, get ready to evacuate. May, that means you. Carlson-May said over the speakers. That's an order? Set it to autopilot and get to the cargo bay. Mahmoud /dial. I reared back with a deep breath then leaned forward, a wide blast of ice enveloping the area in front of me. The temperature drop froze the servitors in a wide area, allowing Phantasma to slash them apart with her magic sword while Sky hit them with bullets from her shoulder turrets. And yet, we were getting surrounded. Chernobog was happy about that, the dark spirit shooting from one servitor to another and ripping them apart with his teeth. Galena was doing a really good impression of Frankenstrike and Thor. Sky was kicking more ass than I expected. Phantasma was making Gandalf look like Frodo, but we were barely making a dent in the numbers around us. A kaleidoscope of purple magic, ice beams, lightning, plasma from Sky and the monkeys, and the cannon turrets joined together to turn the Russian skies into a beautiful war zone. Carlson suddenly spoke over our comms, my Omnitrix blinking green light with every word. All teams, we're going to have to evacuate the bus. Try and hold them off of us until then. Already done. Galena and I said in unison. A servitor charged toward me. I punched it aside where it bounced off the bus, only for another to hit me. Phantasma blasted it off of me, and I returned the favor by hitting another one. How many of these things are there? Sky shouted, standing back to back with Galena. Enough, I growled in annoyance. Chernobog, floating above us, hummed in pleasure. More are coming. With that ominous little line, something large slammed into the roof of the bus, shaking the whole thing. We all staggered with the shockwave of the impact. I stared in shock at the being that had landed on the plane. A servitor, gorilla. I said in honest surprise. Looking back, it made sense, but the suddenness threw me. What had to be 500 pounds of muscle and metal roared. Its left arm had been replaced with a metal cannon, and half its chest was either replaced or covered in steel, a glowing green orb on its back. The thing raised its arm and shot at me. I went intangible, the big ball of light it fired bashing Chernobyl out of the air, the dark god growling in anger as his big bat wings pumped to get him back to us. Oh, shoot me with a cannon? I'm coming for you first. A gorilla, seriously. Sky shouted. Take him down. Phantasma shouted back, blasting at the gorilla with a series of purple beams. Sky and Galena joined her. The orb on the gorilla's back glowed green. Before he could get hit by enough force to turn a tank into mulch, a big orb of green light flowed over him, becoming a shield that absorbed the beams of power. I waited for a moment for the shield to deactivate, then fired as well, hitting the gorilla on the chest. His metal chest frosted over. He didn't seem to like that, cause he leaped forward with a roar. I went intangible, letting him fall through me, every part of his body covered in ice as it passed. More monkeys attacked the others, forcing me and the gorilla to face each other head-on with no distractions. The gorilla raised his left arm and fired shots at me, forcing me to dodge as I floated about or go intangible. I fired beams at him, slowing him down or bouncing off his shield. He charged me again. I went intangible and dived into the plane beneath us. I fired a beam of ice as I flew back up toward up, the beam smashing into his chin, followed by my fist. Shoryuken, I said in Big Chill's ghostly voice. The gorilla staggered back, then raised his left cannon hand again. I went intangible before I realized that he wasn't aiming at me. With a primal roar, he fired. The ball of green flame that left his cannon slammed into the right wing's engine. The engine exploded in fire and sparks, scrap metal flying about while the shockwave shook the world around us. Oh you dick, I said softly. The gorilla roared. I sprayed him with ice again, trying to distract it. It raised shields, my ice uselessly bouncing off the green orb. It raised its cannon arm, the end glowing green. I ignored the shadow that flowed behind the gorilla to stop firing my ice beams. The gorilla dropped shields to fire back. That was when a massive arm wrapped around its cannon. Hey, Chernobyl grabbed the gorilla by the other arm. He pulled the screaming animal close. I could see portions of its soul floating off of it. Chernobyl smiled, an inky black tongue slipping past razor-sharp teeth to lick at the gorilla's face. I don't let a man hit me with his cannon. The gorilla struggled in its grip, muscles of flesh straining, limbs of metal squealing as they were crushed by hands and claws of shadow. Chernobyl smiled, slowly opening his mouth over the gorilla's neck. Unless he's willing to give me dinner. Teeth shredded into soul, flesh, and metal. Chernobyl laughed as he began to dig into the creature that screamed in his grasp. He slashed out chunks of what I could only think of as soul and swallowed it down. Ah, he sighed happily. Was it good for you? Chernobyl asked the discarded remains of a robot gorilla in a satisfied tone. I turned away to float over the bus, more easily able to catch up with it. I froze servitor after servitor, punching when needed punching and going intangible where I could as the onslaught continued. Then a group of monkeys twisted in the air. For a moment I wondered what the hell they were doing. They didn't seem to aim at us. Instead, they flew toward. Oh shit. I dived toward them, raising my hands to fire at them. They fired at me, forcing me to dodge while firing, but I only got 3 in a spraying movement. The rest slammed into the other wing. Oh come on. Sky shouted below me. This is my house you assholes. The shout was followed by more shots of plasma from her palms before she spun to kick aside a servitor that must have been made from an ape instead of a monkey. I grit my teeth. Forget the bus? Defend the cargo bay, make sure everyone can get out. We all headed there while fighting through an army, 2 more loud thumbs followed by a pair of gorillas trying to shoot us. Chernobyl groaned. A man, I filled up on empty calories already. So delicious, so wasteful. You are a special kind of weird, I grumbled. I took a deep breath. When I breathed out, the immense wave of cold that shot out of my mouth became a blizzard. The gorillas raised shields, blocking the blast, but a majority of the monkeys froze over. You should do that first from now on, Phantasma mumbled while monkeys fell to the ground. Not without making sure I can take out as many as I can, knowing the move would just expend energy otherwise, especially for prolonged combat when a simple beam was so much more efficient. I shook my head at the sight of the gorillas shooting up into the air to go after us, the green orbs on the backs acting like jetpacks. Damn, this was just getting annoying. Phil Cowlson/leader of Team S.H.I.E.L.D. Cowlson sighed in relief when he entered the lab with Creel and Mikhail to see Simmons and Fitz finishing up. All done. Yes. Fitz shouted, running from computer to computer. All the data is backing up right now. Cowlson, are you sure? The bus is lost. The words felt like sand in his mouth. Cowlson forced them out anyway. Get to the drop packs. Simmons ran up to Fitz and handed him a grey device that looked like the jetpacks from modern cinema. Cowlson, should we go now? Creel, Cowlson said as an answer. When the material absorber looked at him, he continued. Go down with them. Where are Craven and Vanguard? Here, Vanguard strode into the room, already wearing a similar pack. He was followed by Craven, who was holding his own back with some distaste. Good. We'll jump together, don't want to get lost on the ground. Cowlson led the way out as the cargo bay door slowly dropped. As it did, Big Chill and Phantasma flew into land in front of them. We're getting swarmed, Big Chill said. If we could go all out and stop worrying about the plane, we might be in better shape. You'll get your chance, Vanguard said in response. Are we all here? Phantasma asked, worried. Carlson looked around. His eyes widened in realization. May. On my way. Dial's Omnitrix symbol on his chest blinked with each word. Go without me, I'll catch up. Damn it, Carlson cursed. Everyone, head out. I'll stay and make sure she's safe. Carlson-Mikhail seemed ready to say. He was interrupted when the plane rocked. That'll be the gorillas, Dial mused. Gorillas? Creel said incredulously. It's been an odd night, Phantasma answered. When a lock of hair fell across her face, she blew it out of the way. Go, now. Carlson barked. After a look at everyone else, Vanguard nodded. Come on. He ran toward the door and leaped out. Sir, Simmons said softly, pausing before saying anything else. Then she sighed. Good luck. Same from me, sir, Fitz said. Creel led them over to the bay door. I'm going to drop first, he said. Don't you need a drop pack? Simmons asked him, a worried look on her face. Creel eyed the back. Then he smirked. No, I'm going to clear the landing zone. He shifted into his vibranium form. Before anyone could say anything, Creel twisted to fall out of the plane, plummeting to the ground with immense speed. Ha! Craven barked with a savage smile. He really knows how to live. That's one way to put it, Simmons grumbled. With a deep breath she followed, Fitz close behind. Everyone leaped out one by one while he moved over to Lola. Carlson stopped to stare out at the plane. After all this time, all the battles they'd fought. He felt at a loss as he watched his plane shatter around him. The bus had been transportation, weapon, base, lab, and home. It had protected them, helped them. In many ways, it had saved the world as much as the rest of them. And now he was about to lose it. Carlson was drawn from his thoughts when May came into the cargo bar. She leaped over the railing, ignoring the stairs, and rushed over to him. We need to go. He nodded slowly. After one last look, he turned to May, who was looking for a pack. Forget it. Get in. May looked over at him as he opened the door to Lola. Nodding firmly, she leaped in as well. Carlson twisted the key into his car's ignition and chuckled sadly. Kinda sad, but I've always wondered if I could pull this off. The car started up and he reversed out into the open air behind them. Mahmoud Shaft/Dial. Carlson driving backward in Lola surprised the hell out of me. As I watched, the wheels folded in, the hubcaps pointed toward the ground and blasted out jets. He twisted her around and flew her down to join us. Coming to a hover next to me, Sky, and Phantasma, we all watched as the bus plummeted through the sky. Maybe it won't be that bad, I said hesitantly. Maybe we'll be able to repair it or dash. Green and purple lights erupted around the bus. In a spectacular display of light and sound, the bus, home of Team Shield, exploded. I set it up to take out as many as I could, May said softly as the red fire of the bus last fight shone on her face. Figured I'd give her a shot at revenge. Goodbye, Sky said sadly, shrapnel raining down on the forest below. We're not done yet. Carlson turned to look at us. Dial, go shut down that fire. He indicated toward the flames that had arisen due to the plane shrapnel smashing into the forest. Take Phantasma as backup. The rest of us will go down and join the others. Got it, Carlson, I agreed. I looked over at Phantasma. She gave me a firm nod, the two of us twisting into the air to head toward the fire. How did the monkeys sneak up on us? Phantasma asked as we flew side by side. They must have had some sort of stealth system, I mused. Then again, they could have been mistaken for birds? We'll have to find out later. I went intangible, diving through the trees as Phantasma flew just above. Plus side, we're pretty close to our destination anyway. Coming to a stop just above the fire that was burning the forest, I felt a bit of relief that things weren't that bad. The floor was covered in snow, and most of the fires hadn't begun to rise. Still, the training I'd been given told me not to take a risk. Even a snow-filled forest didn't necessarily negate the possibility of a fire spreading out of control. I could mentally feel my clock for my big chill running down, not literally, more just me guessing combined with experience for how long forms lasted, so I started blasting the fires around us, dropping the temperature around us even further. I did it over and over, cooling the metal shrapnel around us and puffing out the fires. Then I realized something, cursing. Damn it, I grumbled. What's wrong? Phantasma asked. I forgot this form doesn't really have problems with high heat. This species actually eats plasma. I shook my head. Didn't have to go intangible. I could have literally eaten every shot that came at me. When I looked over at her, Phantasma blinked. How does one forget something like that? Get as many forms as I have and lots of things can slip your mind, I said with a shrug, pulling my wings in to surround me in a hooded cloak. I finished up a few minutes later and looked up at the still floating Phantasma. We'd better join the others. Before I could say anything else, the Omnitrix began to beep, and I turned back into a human. I grunted in annoyance. Damn it. And now I'm freezing again. Oh, so that's what it looks like, Phantasma said, dropping to join me. When you become human again, I mean. Pretty much, yeah, I rubbed my arms, trying to get some circulation going. Is it strange, turning into aliens? She asked curiously. Or does it feel natural? A bit of both honestly. Like, when I'm an alien it feels normal to have 4 arms, or wings, or no eyes. But I'm still mentally human, so I can get a bit weirded out about it. I looked around. Let's go. Dial. In moments, the Katam armor I was used to keeping on me flowed over my body, leaving everything but my face uncovered. I sighed in relief as my black and green armor clamped into place and protected me from the cold, reaching for my waist to feel. Oh shit, my sword. I spun in place, staring at the remains of the plane. It was on the plane. Phantasma looked around the scrap metal all over the floor and hanging in the trees. Could it have been destroyed? It'll take more than that. Tony made that thing to last, I said back, trying to figure out what I could do. Man, I loved that thing. Is it really so important? She asked. It's the best melee weapon I've got and a gift from Tony. I stabbed a Wendigo with the thing, I mused softly. Oh, I can help. Phantasma stood before me, raising her hands. Okay, hold still. I just need to do a spell I made. It'll connect your soul to your sword, letting you find it. Then I'll disconnect you again. I blinked down at her as she bit her bottom lip, twisting her palms together, flickering her fingers against the palms, separating them, then clapping them together. Purple rose over her hands. She held out her hands, placing them on my chest. I had a second to wonder if Chernobyl was next to me again before I realized what was happening. The energy that touched my chest filled me with the feeling of acid in my veins. I gulped unsteadily. That little motion felt like it took all my energy. When the energy faded, I felt disgusted. Like I'd been dipped into something had a honey-sweet smell, but was also made of raw toxic sludge. Something horrific that was also somehow intoxicating. Butancidine. Phantasma eyed me as I stood there. Are you okay? Some people don't seem to like my magic when I use it on them. I coughed and felt like I had a glob of Play-Doh in my throat. With another hacking cough, being careful to aim at the ground, I shook my head. Oh man. That was rough. What was that? A location spell. When she spoke, she sounded hurt. Hurt and sad. I'm sorry. My magic. I don't know why, but it just has that effect. People say it feels disgusting, but it always feels normal to me. I nodded slowly. I guess that means it works. And that's all that matters. Thanks, Phantasma, I said with a smile. It was a struggle, but I really did feel grateful, so the smile was as broad as I could make it. She smiled back, eyes glittering. Okay, so what do I have to dash? I was cut off when a line of white came from my chest. The line slowly twisted through the air, headed deeper into the forest. Oh, like that, I guess. Yes, Phantasma seemed a bit proud, flipping her hair as she flew up into the air and followed after the line. Not willing to walk, I jumped, activating the jump jets in my armor to cover more distance. With her flying and me jumping, the two of us followed the line through the forest. I tried not to let the fact that the line leaving my chest felt like a ghost had her hand in my chest and wrapped around my heart throw me off. Tried to at least. We ended up near a large chunk of metal that had probably been a wall of the business portions of scorched leather and furniture stuffing, as well as a bunch of trees that had fallen over, lay around, covered in ice from when I'd blasted the area as Big Chill. The line went under a thick piece of metal. I crouched and grabbed the piece, using the armor's enhanced strength to pull it up and toss it aside, making sure to do it with my leg muscles rather arms. I dug through the remains of metal and glass until I found the handle of my sword, sighing in relief. Thanks, Phantasma, I said as I looked up at her. Your magic is pretty sweet. I mean, it feels weird as hell, but it's damn cool. She seemed really happy about that for some reason, practically glowing with joy. You're welcome. We should join the others though. Got it. I turned and walked in the direction the others had been falling, jumping moments later to follow her flight as we went through the trees. It took a while for us to make our way there. When we came close, the sounds of gunfire and plasma bolts began to fill the air, coming from the skies above. We shared a look and double-timed it there. Leopold Fitz. Fitz yelled in fear as he fell toward the forest below. Creel was quickly falling down below him, barely visible as a vibranium dot far below. Gemma was alongside him, screaming as well. Fitz held out his arms and legs like he'd been told a million times, slowing down his descent with a wider surface area. The science of terminal velocity filled his mind, not helping his minor panic attack. Bloody hell, people who did this for fun were lunatics. In his ear, his calm was filled with the sound of Carlson. Okay, don't panic, but you guys are under attack. What do you mean don't bloody panic? Fitz spat out. Just stay calm. Activate the drop packs when you hit the right elevation. I'm coming down in Lola, and we'll all be together. Gulping, Fitz looked at the altimeter on his wrist, the one all drop packs came with. Far too fast for his liking, it was dropping. He waited for an amount of time that felt like both forever and far too short. The second it hit the green zone, Fitz tried to hit the button on the right strap of the drop pack. His fingers slipped. Panicking, he hit it again. With a gentle whoosh sound, the jets on the drop pack ignited. Bit by bit, they revved up, slowing him down. By the time they were fully active, he was able to breathe a sigh of relief. Until the monkey with wings flew past, scaring the hell out of him. I am getting real tired of being scared. Fitz shouted in annoyance. Fear not. Mikhail floated down to join him, followed by Simmons, Craven, Vanguard, Sky, Crimson Dynamo, Chernobog, and Carlson with Main Lola. The fighters surrounded Fitzsimmons while more servitor monkeys came up from the forest. We are here. With that triumphant cry, he pulled out a pistol, firing at the servitors as they flew past. Vanguard joined him, while Craven, to Fitz's surprise, pulled out a Bowie knife. Sky and Chernobog flew about, while Carlson twisted Lola around. Fitz looked down at the ground in time to barely see Creel about to hit the ground. Or, not the ground. On the ground below, more servitors could be seen running about. A gorilla was roaring up at Creel in free fall. Time seemed to slow as Creel came down at the roaring gorilla. Creel raised an arm. When he met the gorilla, it was elbow first. The impact sent a shockwave that shook the trees free of snow. Creel's elbow dented in the gorilla's skull, split it apart in a spray of sparks, shrapnel, and flesh, and just kept going. A combination of terminal velocity and vibranium durability let the human bullet crush his way through the cybernetic horror. When he impacted the ground, an immense crater was created around him. "Holy," Fitz said in shock, watching Creel stand up to roar a challenge at the monkeys. "Eat your heart out, Wrath." Carlson piloted Lola around, 2 machine guns sprouting from the headlights. May had a pistol in her hand, firing at the monkeys while Carlson unleashed hell on the buzzing creatures with Lola. At one point, May quickly headshot a monkey, then hit it 2 times in the heart when that didn't finish it. Whenever the monkeys grouped up, Carlson activated Lola's flamethrower, scorching the things. Poor Lola ended up getting hit hard by the plasma bolts, scorching her surface with holes and melted metal, one of the shots shattering the windshield. Carlson kept fighting. Sky floated about the landscape, teeth gritted under her helmet. She twisted through the air with impressive ability, blasting out plasma shots, her shoulder guns firing. At one point the shoulder guns clicked. Out of ammo, the shoulder guns sank back into her armor, and she kept fighting. She seemed to have learned a new technique, a palm strike at the same times as she fired plasma. Badass. Craven, to Fitz's surprise, seemed to be using his Bowie knife to great effect. He was using the slow engines of the drop pack to somehow just end up in the cybernetic monkeys' paths. Like he just knew where they were flying next, and didn't need the high speed of Lola or Sky to meet them. When the monkeys came close, he would slash out. First, he sliced off their wings, the knife somehow chopping through metal with ease. Then he took off the arms as the monkeys fell. With 2 stabs, he pierced the chest and head. It was terrifying. He was fast, ruthless, and quiet. There was a primal feel to the attacks, the way he seemed to prowl about and surprise his opponents. Even in the air, he made a knife a viable weapon, just by being smart about it. Vanguard stayed closest to Fitzsimmons, his shield high. Fitz found himself trying to figure out what metal the shield was made of. Because no matter how many plasma shots hit the glistening shield, it was undamaged. He blocked a shot headed for Simmons, pulled Fitz out of the path of another, then raised his pistol to fire at the monkey, forcing it to dodge. "Thank you," Fitzsimmons said in unison. Vanguard only nodded, eyes narrowed as he continued to defend them. Chernobyl flew past then. Fitz gasped at the sucking feeling that came from him. A sense that was more mental than physical. What was that? It felt like he had been, what was that? Chernobyl laughed, grabbing a servitor between his hands. As Fitz watched in uncontrollable curiosity, the servitor seemed to emit a sort of energy. A pale white stream of light in the form of a monkey, one that had been withered, with no cybernetics. What was that? Not a power source, something else. A traitorous part of Fitz's mind whispered that Chernobyl had absorbed the soul of his victim. He turned away to look at Crimson Dynamo. Dynamo had taken to the ground, landing to fight alongside Creed. She hit the ground with an eruption of lightning, melting the snow around her for 20 feet. A gorilla rushed her. She blasted it with lightning, the massive gorilla blocking it with that strange shield it emitted from the green orb on its back. The gorilla slammed into Crimson, and came to a stop when Crimson raised a palm and stopped it in place. She raised the gorilla high, the animal roaring, then slammed it on its back. Held down by Crimson Dynamo's armored hand on his chest, the gorilla screamed out on the ground, scratching at her armor and the ground, punching her desperately in the chest. Galena raised her other hand and punched the gorilla in the face. Once, twice. The gorilla's face was covered in blood. Then she punched it once more, sparks and gore following the monster's head exploding. Galena rose up and created twin balls of electricity in her palms. The round blue-white orbs flew out, melting snow on the way and turning servitors to corpses. She hit another one in the midst of attacking Creel, knocking it back. The woman and man of metal fought side by side against the overwhelming numbers, electricity, and vibranium fists causing mayhem. Fitz looked over at Mikhail. The Russian soldier had pulled out a massive pistol, one that Fitz recognized. He'd looked up a lot of Russian weaponry on his way to the country after all. This one was a RSH-12, a model of gun that had a reputation as one of the most powerful revolvers in the world, only in competition with the Smith & Wesson 500. It was capable of firing 12.7 x 55 mm cartridges, the same sort of bullets used in Russian sniper rifles. Mikhail raised the massive revolver and fired it. A monkey tore in half. He fired again, the Russian's eyes hard. A servitor lost a plasma shooting arm. Another shot ripped a hole in the chest of a servitor, spraying metal, wires, and computer chips. Hollow point. The nutter was using hollow point bullets in one of the most powerful revolvers in the world. Mikhail aimed at a larger servitor, this one more ape than a monkey, that was flying down toward Creel, who was in the process of lifting a boulder off the ground and tossing it at a gorilla. His bullet sliced a hole in it, tossing it to the ground. Before he could fire another shot, a plasma shot hit Mikhail's drop pack. Mikhail said in Russian as his drop pack exploded. Mikhail. Carlson shouted in horror as Mikhail fell dozens of feet to the forest below. He'll be fine. Vanguard called out, to Fitz's surprise. Let's land. Coming to the ground, the drop packs stopped holding them up, allowing the group to continue fighting. Craven disappeared into the forest, while Vanguard stabbed the pointed end of his shield into a servitor. Everyone went into battle except Carlson, Fitz, and Simmons, Fitzsimmons ducking behind Lola when she landed while Carlson and May hopped out of the car. May, undeterred by the lack of power armor or enhancements the others had, snapped out a baton, held her pistol out, and began fighting alongside the others, determination on her features as she struck out at her opponents, baton knocking the lighter servitors to the ground while the others took care of the larger opponents. We have to find Mikhail. Carlson shouted over the din. If he's hurt dash. A sound came from the forest. All other noise stopped. Everyone turned to look at it as the trees shook with the power of that roaring sound. Birds flew off in the distance in a chorus of fear. Fitz gulped. What was that? He asked trepidly. A friend, Dynamo answered, rising to her full height. A tree came crashing down in the distance. Then another and another, coming toward them. A noise like an avalanche of stones down a mountainside came with it, the roar of something powerful. Fitz had never heard a true Hulk or Wrath roar in person, but he imagined that was what it sounded like. The being that stepped out of the woods was as large and wide as the Hulk, but covered in fur. Fangs flashed in the light. Massive hands clutched a gorilla by the head, dragging the cybernetic creature behind him. The other hand reached up to rest on a tree, then pushed it aside with ease, sending the whole thing tumbling to the ground. A bear. A man. A gigantic bear man. He, made that mountain roar of noise again and clenched the fist holding the servitor head, crushing it in his grip. Hey guys, Dial said behind them as he joined them, Phantasma floating near him. What are we? Oh, holy shit. Mikhail. Phantasma said cheerily. Mikhail. Carlson asked, stunned. Winter Guard. The bear man raised the destroyed servitor high. Break them. I knew it. Dial shouted. Then all hell broke out. Author's note: there's only a few big reveals in this chapter, since it was mostly about combat. Mostly how Phantasma's magic feels to people who aren't her, and the Mikhail has a very good barber. The rest was combat. I was trying my best to fill the awesome page of the TV tropes for this story since it hasn't been touched in a while. Seriously, this was really fun to write. And we haven't even gotten to the coolest parts.